Did you try the new elixir?
They say it grows hair instantly. I heard it makes you invisible.
The Fairy Caravan, the beloved story by Beatrix Potter, author of the famous Peter Rabbit books. Chapter 1. In the land of green ginger, there is a town called Marmalade, which is inhabited exclusively by guinea pigs. They are of all colors and of two sorts. The common, or garden, guinea pigs are the most numerous. They have short hair, and they run errands and twitter. The guinea pigs of the other variety are called Abyssinian cavies. They have long hair and side whiskers, and they walk upon their toes. The common guinea pigs admire and envy the hair of the Abyssinian cavies. They would give anything to be able to make their own short hair grow long. So there was excitement and twittering amongst the short-haired guinea pigs when Messrs. Ratton and Scratch, hair specialists, sent out hundreds of advertisements by post describing their new elixir. The Abyssinian cavies who required no hair stimulant were affronted by the advertisements. They found the twitterings tiresome. During the night between March 31st and April 1st, Messrs. Ratton and Scratch arrived in Marmalade. They placarded the walls of the town with posters, and they set up a booth in the marketplace. Next morning, quantities of elegantly stoppered bottles were displayed upon the booth. The rats stood in front of the booth and distributed handbills describing the wonderful effects of their new quintessence. "Come buy, come buy, come buy a bottleful and try it on a doorknob. We guarantee that it will grow a crop of onions," shouted Messrs. Ratton and Scratch. Crowds of short-haired guinea pigs swarmed around the booth. The Abyssinian cavies sniffed and passed by upon their toes. They remarked that Mr. Ratton was slightly bald. The short-haired guinea pigs continued to crowd around, twittering and asking questions, but they hesitated to buy. The price of a very small bottle holding only 2 thimblefuls was 10 peppercorns. And besides this high charge, there was an uncomfortable doubt as to what the stuff was made of. The Abyssinian cavies spread ill-natured reports that it was manufactured from slugs. Mr. Scratch emphatically contradicted this slander. He asserted that it was distilled from the purest Arabian moonshine. "And Arabia is quite close to Abyssinia," said Mr. Scratch with a wink, pointing to a particularly long-haired Abyssinian cavie. "Come buy a sample bottle, can't you? Listen to these testimonials from our grateful customers," said Mr. Ratton. He proceeded to read aloud a number of letters, but he did not specifically deny a rumor that got about a certain notorious nobleman, a much-married nobleman, who had bought a large bottle of the quintessence by persuasion of the first of his 8 wives. This nobleman, so the story ran, had used the hair stimulant with remarkable results. He had grown a magnificent beard, but the beard was blue, which may be fashionable in Arabia, but the short-haired guinea pigs were dubious. Messrs. Ratton and Scratch shouted themselves hoarse. "Come buy a sample bottle half price and try it for salad dressing. The cucumbers will grow of themselves while you are mixing the hair oil and vinegar. Buy a sample bottle, can't you?" shouted Messrs. Ratton and Scratch. The short-haired guinea pigs determined to purchase 1 bottle of the smallest size, to be tried upon Tuppeny. Tuppeny was a short-haired guinea pig of dilapidated appearance. He suffered from toothache and chilblains, and he had never had much hair, not even of the shortest. It was thin and patchy. Whether this was the result of chilblains or of ill treatment is uncertain. He was an object, whatever the cause. Obviously, he was a suitable subject for experiment. "His appearance can scarcely become worse, provided he doesn't turn blue," said his friend Henry P. "Let us subscribe for a small bottle and apply it as directed." So Henry P. and 9 other guinea pigs bought a bottle and ran in a twittering crowd towards Tuppeny's house. On the way, they overtook Tuppeny going home. They explained to him that out of sympathy they had subscribed for a bottle of moonshine to cure his toothache and chilblains, and that they would rub it on for him as Mrs. Tuppeny was out. Tuppeny was too depressed to argue. He allowed himself to be led away. Henry P. and the 9 other guinea pigs poured the whole bottleful over Tuppeny and put him to bed. They wore gloves themselves while applying the quintessence. Tuppeny was quite willing to go to bed. He felt chilly and damp. Presently Mrs. Tuppeny came in. She complained about the sheets. Henry P. and the other guinea pigs went away. After tea they returned at 5:30. Mrs. Tuppeny said nothing had happened. The short-haired guinea pigs took a walk. They looked in again at 6. Mrs. Tuppeny was abusive. She said there was no change. At 6:30 they called again to inquire. Mrs. Tuppeny was still more abusive. She said Tuppeny was very hot. Next time they came, she said the patient was in a fever and felt as if he were growing a tail. She slammed the door in their faces and said she would not open it again for anybody. Henry P. and the other guinea pigs were perturbed. They betook themselves to the marketplace, where Messrs. Ratton and Scratch were still trying to sell bottles by lamplight, and they asked anxiously whether there was any risk of tails growing. Mr. Scratch burst into ribald laughter, and Mr. Ratton said, "No sort of tail except pigtails on the head." During the night, Messrs. Ratton and Scratch packed up their booth and departed from the town of Marmalade. Next morning at daybreak, a crowd of guinea pigs collected on Tuppeny's doorstep. More and more arrived until Mrs. Tuppeny came out with a scrubbing brush and a pail of water. In reply to inquiries from a respectful distance, she said that Tuppeny had had a disturbed night. Further she would not say, except that he was unable to keep on his nightcap. No more could be ascertained until, providentially, Mrs. Tuppeny discovered that she had nothing for breakfast. She went out to buy a carrot. Henry P. and a crowd of other guinea pigs swarmed into the house as soon as she was round the corner of the street. They found Tuppeny out of bed, sitting on a chair looking frightened. At least, presumably it was Tuppeny, but he looked different. His hair was over his ears and nose. And that was not all, for whilst they were talking to him, his hair grew down onto his empty plate. It grew something alarming. It was quite nice hair and the proper colour, but Tuppeny said he felt funny, sore all over, as if his hair were being brushed back to front, and prickly and hot like needles and pins, and altogether uncomfortable. And well he might. His hair, it grew and it grew and it grew, faster and faster, and nobody knew how to stop it. Messrs. Ratton and Scratch had gone away and left no address. If they possessed an antidote, there was no way of obtaining it. All day that day, and for several days, still the hair kept growing. Mrs. Tuppeny cut it and stuffed pincushions with it and pillowcases and bolsters. But as fast as she cut it, it grew again. When Tuppeny went out, he tumbled over it, and the rude little guinea pig boys ran after him, shouting, "Old Whiskers!" His life became a burden. Then Mrs. Tuppeny began to pull it out. The effect of the quintessence was beginning to wear off. If only she would have exercised a little patience, but she was tired of cutting, so she pulled. She pulled so painfully and shamelessly that Tuppeny could not stand it. He determined to run away, away from the hair-pulling and the chilblains and the long-haired and the short-haired guinea pigs, away and away, so far away that he would never come back. So that is how it happened that Tuppeny left his home in the town of Marmalade and wandered into the world alone. Chapter 2. In after years, Tuppeny never had any clear recollection of his adventures while he was running away. It was like a bad mixed-up dream that changes into morning sunshine and is forgotten. A long, long journey, noisy, jolting, terrifying, too frightened and helpless to understand anything that happened before the journey's end. The first thing that he remembered was a country lane, a steep, winding lane, always climbing uphill. Tuppeny ran and ran, splashing through the puddles with little bare feet. The wind blew cold against him. He wrapped his hands in his mop of hair, glad to feel its pleasant warmth over his ears and nose. It had stopped growing, and his chilblains had disappeared. Tuppeny felt like a new guinea pig. For the first time he smelt the air of the hills. What matter if the wind were chilly? It blew from the mountains. The lane led to a wide common with hillocks and hollows and clumps of bushes. The short-cropped turf would soon be gay with wild flowers. Even in early April it was sweet. Tuppeny felt as though he could run for miles. But night was coming. The sun was going down in a frosty orange sunset behind purple clouds. Was it clouds or was it the hills? He looked for shelter and saw smoke rising behind some tall savin bushes. Tuppeny advanced cautiously and discovered a curious little encampment. There were two vehicles, unharnessed. A small shaggy pony was grazing nearby. One was a two-wheeled cart with a tilt or hood made of canvas stretched over hoops. The other was a tiny four-wheeled caravan. It was painted yellow picked out with red. Upon the sides were these words in capital letters: Alexander and William's Circus. Upon another board was printed, the pygmy elephant, the learned pig, the fat dormouse of Salisbury, live polecats and weasels. The caravan had windows with muslin curtains, just like a house. There were outside steps up to the back door, and a chimney on the roof. A canvas screen fastened to light posts sheltered the encampment from the wind. The smoke which Tuppeny had seen did not come from the chimney. There was a cheerful fire of sticks burning on the ground in the midst of the camp. Several animals sat beside it or busied themselves with cooking. One of them was a white West Highland terrier. When he noticed Tuppeny, he commenced to bark. The ponies stopped grazing and looked round. A bird who had been running up and down on the grass flew up to the roof of the caravan. The little dog came forward barking. Tuppeny turned and fled. He heard yap, 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 and grunt, 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 and pattering feet behind him. He tripped over his hair and fell in a twittering heap. A cold nose and a warm tongue examined Tuppeny and turned him over. He gazed up in terror at the little dog and a small black pig who were sniffing all over him. Whatever sort of animal is it, Sandy? Never saw the like. It seems to be all hair. What do you call yourself, Fuzzy Wig? Please, sir, I'm not a fuzzy wig, a fuzzy pig. Please, sir, I'm a guinea pig. What? A pig? Where's your tail? Said the little black pig. Please, sir, no tail. I never had. No guinea pig, no tail, no guinea pigs have tails, twittered Tuppeny in great alarm. What? No tails? I had an uncle with no tail, but that was accidental. Carry him to the fire, Sandy. He is cold and wet. Sandy lifted Tuppeny delicately by the scruff of the neck. He held his own head high and curled his tail over his back to avoid treading on Tuppeny's hair. Paddy Pig scampered in front. What? We've found a new long-haired animal. Put more sticks on the fire, Jenny Ferret. Set him down beside the dormouse, Sandy. Let him warm his toes. The person addressed as Jane Ferret was an oldish person, about 12 inches high when she stood upright. She wore a cap, a brown stuff dress, and always a small crochet crossover. She filled up the teapot from a kettle on the fire and gave Tuppeny a mug of hot balm tea and a baked apple. He was much comforted by the warmth of the fire and by their kindness. In reply to questions, he said his name was Tuppeny, but he seemed to have forgotten where he came from. Only he remembered vaguely that his hair had been a grievance. The circus company admired it prodigiously. It is truly marvelous, said the dormouse, stretching out a small pink hand and touching a damp, draggled tress. Do you use hairpins? I'm sorry, I haven't any, twittered Tuppeny apologetically. Let hairpins be provided. Hairpins, said the dormouse, falling fast asleep. I will go fetch some in the morning if you will lend me your purse, said Ikey Shepster the starling, who was pecking a hole in the turf to hide something. You will do nothing of the sort. Bring me my teaspoon, please, said Jenny Ferret. The starling chittered and laughed and flew to the top of the caravan where he roosted at night. The sun had set. The red firelight danced and flickered round the camp circle. The pony dozed beside the caravan, lazily whisking his long tail. Sandy was lying stretched before the fire and panting with the heat. He watched Tuppeny with bright brown eyes through his shaggy white eyebrows. Tuppeny, where are you going to? I have forgotten. What do you intend to do with yourself? I don't know. Let him ride in the tilt cart, said Pony Billy. They were the first words that he had spoken. Tuppeny, will you come with us? You shall have your share of fun and peppercorns and sugar candy. Come with us and join the circus, Tuppeny, cried all the little animals. I think I would like to, yes, please, thank you, twittered Tuppeny shyly. Quite right, quite right. What? What? Said the small black pig. Lucky you found us today. We will be over the hills and far away tomorrow. Wake up, Zarifa Dormouse. Get into your sleeping box, and you, Tuppeny, shall go to bed in this hamper. Good night. Chapter 3. Tuppeny fell asleep at once and slept for many hours. He awoke in the dark and he bumped his head against the lid of the hamper. The tilt cart was jolting and rumbling. Don't be frightened, said a pleasant little voice from a neighboring nest box. We are only moving camp. Sleep again. Sleep, said the dormouse. Tuppeny stopped twittering. Presently there was a still more violent lurch. Tuppeny squeaked loudly. The cart stopped and the black pig pushed back the canvas curtain of the hood. What? Squeaking, twittering at 3 o'clock in the morning. You will wake the dormouse. Please, Mr. Paddy Pig, I dreamed I was in a ship. What? A ship? Seasick? It's only me pulling the cart. Go to sleep again directly, little guinea pig man. Tuppeny obediently curled himself up in his hay bed. When he woke again, it was broad daylight and a bright, windy morning. The caravan company was snugly encamped on a green level sward near an old stone quarry. There was a semicircle of high grey rocks, topped with broom bushes that swayed and bobbed in the rushing east wind. White clouds raced overhead, and Jenny Ferret's fire puffed and sputtered in spite of comparative calm down below in the quarry. At the foot of the rocks for many years the big folk had been tipping rubbish, old pots and pans, fruit tins, jam pots and broken bottles. Jenny Ferret had built a stone fireplace. She was cooking with an old frying pan and some sardine tins. In fact, she was trying which tins would hold water with a view to carrying off a stock of cooking utensils. Paddy Pig was stirring the porridge for breakfast. Pony Billy grazed on the rough grass on the quarry bank. Sandy was nowhere to be seen. Wake up, Zarifa, whistled the starling. Wake up, new long-haired animal. My, what a mop of hair! It's full of hay seeds. What, you meddlesome bird! His hair is beautiful. It will draw crowds when he's dressed up, said Paddy Pig, stirring vigorously. If I had hair like that, I could play Sleeping Beauty, said the dormouse. She sat on the step of the caravan, washing her face and hands rapidly and cleaning her sleek chestnut coat. She had black beady eyes, very long whiskers, and a long furry tail with a white tip. Her nose and eyebrows were turning grey. She was a most sweet person, but slumberous. Madam, you sleep, and you are beautiful, said Paddy Pig, turning round and bowing low with the wooden thivel in his hand. The little fat old dormouse laughed till she shook like jelly. Never mind, Tuppeny. I will brush it for you. Where is Sandy? Gone to buy a fiddle string. Gone to buy fine clothes for Tuppeny, whistled the starling. I trust he will remember hairpins. Have you a pocket comb, Tuppeny? I have no pocket, no comb, pocket comb I forgot. You appear to have forgotten most things, Tuppeny, said Pony Billy. You may borrow my curry comb if it is not too large. I fear it would scrape him, Pony William, but we're obliged to you. Come, Tuppeny, fetch a porridge saucer and sit beside me, said Zarifa. Tuppeny was rather silent during breakfast. He kept looking at the large print letters on the caravan. He pointed at them with his wooden spoon. Zarifa, he whispered, is it full of polecats? Paddy Pig rolled on the ground with laughing. Where is the pygmy elephant? That's a secret, said Jenny Ferret. Here, Ikey Shepster, help me to tidy up. Zarifa will be busy all morning combing out those tangles. So then began the brushing of the hair of Tuppeny, which became a daily task. At first there were pulls and twitches and squeaks, even some hopeless tangles which had to be snipped out with Zarifa's small scissors. but after it was combed through, it was easily kept in order. The brushing became a pleasure to the two little barbers. Tuppeny combed in front, and Zariffa brushed behind. Whenever the brushing stopped, Tuppeny looked over his shoulder and discovered that Zariffa had fallen fast asleep. She told him stories to keep herself awake, and she answered his many questions. "Who plays the fiddle, Zariffa?" "Paddy Pig. Sandy plays the bagpipes, and each of them does step dancing. Paddy Pig dances jigs, and Sandy dances reels, and all of us do country dances." No, I'm not too old and fat," said Zariffa, laughing. "I can dance Hunsdon House, and I can dance a minuet with Belinda Woodmouse. Perhaps we may be dancing this evening, but there is not much room in the quarry. We will soon be moving on again." "Do we always move in the night, Zariffa?" Oh, that hurts. I shall have to snip it, Tuppeny. Give me my scissors. When we travel along the high roads, we usually move in the dark, because the roads are deserted at night. Very few of the big folk are stirring. Would they chase us, Zariffa? No, indeed. They cannot see us while we carry fern seed in our pockets. I have not got a pocket. It will be easy to plait a little packet of fern seed into your hair like Pony Billy's. He carries one in his mane, in a plait that we call a witch's stirrup. But he once had an adventure when he lost his fern seed. "I did not lose it. It was stolen for mischief," said Pony William with a snort. He was grazing near them. Anyway, he was not invisible. He had no fern seed, so the big folk could see him. "Now, Tuppeny, sit still while I finish brushing your hair, and you shall hear the story. Only you must understand that I did not see it happen. I do not travel with the circus in winter weather. I go to live with the oakmen." "Who are they, Zariffa?" "One thing at a time. Hold your head still and listen." Chapter 4. It happened one winter there was a long spell of snow. The circus company was camping in a lonely barn. During real hard weather, they usually preferred accessible places near farms and villages. But this snowstorm had caught them unexpectedly. Indeed, the little caravan itself was fast in a snowdrift under a hedge. The tilt cart had been dragged up to the barn, and the baggage had been carried inside. The building was dry and fairly comfortable, but unfortunately the great double doors could not be opened, so poor Pony Billy had to remain outside. The others, including Paddy Pig, contrived to squeeze between the upright wooden bars of an unglazed low window. There was dry bracken bedding in the barn, but no hay. Pony Billy ate rough grass that grew through the snow upon the banks. He even did some digging with his forefeet like the sheep. But when the snow continued day after day, it became necessary for him and Sandy to go foraging. They borrowed a sledge belonging to the charcoal burners, and they fetched a load of provisions. But they could only carry a very little hay as well. Pony Billy made no complaint about sleeping out. His shaggy coat was inches long. He was warm, even if he woke up half buried with snow in the morning. But he did feel as if he wanted a good feed. So one afternoon in the early darkening, he announced that he intended to sup, and possibly stay a night or two with the gypsy's donkey, Cuddy Simpson. Sandy was not pleased. He did not mind Pony Billy going, but he, Sandy, would have liked to go too, and spend a merry evening with Eddie Tin Cur and the gypsy lurchers. Pony William considered the donkey a harmless, respectable animal, certainly very hard-working. But the Tinker dogs were another matter. They were suspected of all manner of crimes, including sheep-stealing and poaching. Therefore, he said firmly that it was Sandy's duty to stop with the caravan. Ikey Shepster, the starling, joined in the argument. He said people who were not sharp enough to look after their own property deserved to lose it. He ran up and down on Pony Billy's back and twitched his mane and chittered. Pony Billy set off at dusk, walking up the lane that led to the main road. There was deep drifted snow against the walls and hedges. The lane was blocked for carts. Only in the middle there was a beaten trod. The big folk from a farm further south had been using it, and the postman had followed it as a short cut. Pony Billy got out onto the main road with a scramble and a jump over a frozen bank of snow, which the snowplough had cast up across the mouth of the lane. Where the plough had travelled, The road was scraped and smoother and slippery. Pony Billy walked fast without trying to trot. He picked up his neat little feet. The snow was too dry to ball in his hoofs. The night was dark, but there was a ground light from the snow. He walked forwards up the hill. Voices came towards him on the road. Pony Billy was not concerned. The big folk could not see him. He had complete confidence in the fern seed which he carried. He was accustomed to walk and trot invisible. But he had not reckoned with the mischief-making of Ikey Shepster. He thought that his precious packet was safely plaited into his mane, instead of which it had been stolen and hidden by the starling in a mouse hole in the barn. Two tall figures approached out of the darkness to meet him. Pony Billy came on, as bold as bold. He knew that his shoes would not clink in the snow. He believed himself to be invisible, and there was plenty of room to pass. Even when he recognized that the patrollers were two very large policemen, Pony Billy still advanced. The large policeman halted. "What's this, Constable Crabtree?" Then at length Pony Billy stopped too. He stood motionless, puzzled. "It looks to me to be a large, hairy black pig, Sergeant." Pony Billy was considerably startled, but still he stood his ground. Constable Crabtree flashed a bull's-eye lantern upon him. "It's a pony, no bigger than a big dog," said the sergeant. Without warning, the constable sprang at the amazed Pony William and seized him by the forelock. Pony Billy boxed desperately, but he was overpowered by the two large policemen. And alas, the sergeant in his overcoat pocket carried a piece of strong cord, which they twisted into a rough halter. Pony Billy threw himself down. He rolled, he kicked, he tried to bite, but all in vain. They forced him along, and the more he jibbed, the more those large policemen laughed. "Whoa, Pony! Whoa there! He is a spirited little nag. Do you recognize him, Constable Crabtree?" "I do not, Sergeant Nutbush. There is a Galloway at Hilltop Farm, but it's taller. Matter of fact, it's a little mare, that one. They call it Mabel." "Is he the pony from Swiss Cottage?" "He is not, Sergeant. That one is a fell pony. It has nicked ears, same like a Herdwick sheep, and a key bit near and cropped far." "Well, well, well, put him in the pound. Give him a bite of hay. We can advertise him in next week's Gazette." Pony Billy felt that things were getting extremely serious. It was so unfortunately dark. There were no other animals out upon the roads, nobody to carry news of his predicament to Sandy. It was serious. The pound, or pinfold, was a round enclosure with a high circular wall built of cobblestones. After thoughtfully providing an armful of hay, Constable Crabtree locked up Pony Billy and left him. The oak door was ancient but strong. It was padlocked. The key hung upon a nail at the police station. Pony Billy had a satisfying meal at last. Next day he tramped many, many miles round and round inside the pinfold wall. The constable looked in with another supply of hay and remarked that it was funny that nobody claimed him. Pony Billy ate as much hay as he could manage to tuck in. Then he resumed his tramping round and round upon the dirty snow in the pinfold. He neighed loudly and repeatedly. Nobody answered. The walls were very high. Not the tallest Clydesdale horse could have looked over the top of those cobblestones. No living thing did he see till the second afternoon, when a small flock of starlings flew over. They wheeled round in the air after the manner of starlings, and one bird flew back and alighted on the wall. It was Ikey Shepster. He ran along the top of the wall and sputtered and chittered with laughter. Pony Billy ate hay and pretended not to see him. Then, just as Ikey Shepster spread his wings to rejoin the flight of starlings, Pony William remarked that he wished to see Sandy on particular business. "Is that so?" said Ikey Shepster. Pony Billy was left in uncomfortable doubt whether the message would be delivered or not. In the meantime, Sandy had no suspicion but that Pony Billy was safe with the gypsy's donkey, who spent the worst of winter eating mouldy hay and tade pipes in an open-fronted shed on the marshes. It was a most unpleasant surprise when Ikey Shepster flew in with the news that Billy was fast in the pound. "Whose doing is that, I wonder?" said Jenny Ferret. "He must have lost his fern seed. I shall have to get him out somehow, said Sandy. Lost, stolen, or strayed, said Jenny Ferret. Paddy Pig suggested trying to borrow the key of the padlock from the sergeant's black Manx cat, but it was a doubtful expedient, and it would involve calling at the police station. It would be simpler to pick the lock. If Metal will only come with me, we will soon have him out. Sandy waited till moonrise. Then he scampered off to the smithy in the village. The big folk had all gone to bed, in the clear of the moon, but the forge was still working. Metal, the blacksmith's yellow terrier, was doing a job on his own, opening the links in a dog chain. Another dog was blowing the bellows. They greeted Sandy. "Come along and warm yourself at the hearth, Sandy. I'm in a hurry, I cannot wait, and you must come with me, Metal. Poor old Billy is fast in the pound." "Whoo!" whistled Metal. He damped down the fire, gathered up some tools, and they hurried off together. Pony Billy was dozing in the pinfold. He was awakened by the sound of sniffing and scratching under the door. Something was being done to the padlock. Within a few minutes he was free, trotting back towards the village with the dogs racing at his heels. When the constable came next morning, the mysterious pony had vanished. The pinfold was empty. "So you see, Tuppeny," said Zarifa, "it is most important to carry fern seed when we go upon the roads and pass near the big folks, and you must always take great care that it is not lost." Chapter 5. While the caravanners were encamped in the quarry, Sandy had gone shopping to the market town. It was an old-fashioned town with funny, crooked streets and little old squares hidden away round corners. There were archways opening under houses leading from square to square. Sandy made several small purchases at the grocer's and at the saddler's. But his most important piece of shopping was to buy something pretty to make a costume for Tuppeny, who was worthy of considerable outlay by way of dressing up. His remarkable hair and the rarity of guinea pigs combined to make him an acquisition to the circus company. "Choose something bright and fanciful. I will shape it and sew it. And pray remember hairpins," said the dormouse Zarifa, who was clever with her needle. So Sandy, in the course of his shopping, paid a visit to the milliners. The Misses Matilda and Louisa Pussycat kept shop in a tiny, steep, three-storied house with an overhanging upper floor. Each floor came forward over the story below. It made the shop rather dark for matching ribbons. In the attic, Matilda Pussycat, leaning out of the window, could talk to Tabby Whitefoot across the way, at the staircase window of the post office opposite. The street door opened down a step into the house. On the right-hand side of the passage was a tiny parlor, containing a polished mahogany table and 3 chairs with horsehair seats. On a side table were the tea tray and the best tea service, and some shells and coral under a bell glass. By the fireplace were 2 wicker chairs with pink cushions. Some black silhouette portraits of cat ancestors hung on the wall, and on the mantelpiece stood a pot snuff-box figure shaped like an owl. Its head took off, and the box body contained pins and buttons, not snuff. The muslin curtains were spotlessly white. On the other side of the passage was the milliner's shop, and a dark little kitchen behind it. The Mrs. Pussycats lived principally in the kitchen. It was well supplied with the usual assortment of pots and pans, shelves, milk jugs, crooks for hanging things, a deal table, stools, and a corner cupboard. The only unusual feature in the kitchen was a small window under the plate rail. This window did not look out of doors like other windows. It looked into the shop. If a customer came in, Miss Louisa Pussycat applied her eye to the window to see who it was. Once when she looked through, she saw a duck who had come into the shop without quacking. Sandy came in from the street and lifted the latch of the shop door. It had a tinkling bell. "Bow wow! Shop there! Bow wow!" barked Sandy, rapping on the counter. Miss Louisa Pussycat's eye appeared at the little window. She put on a clean apron and came in behind the counter. "Good morning, Mr. Alexander. I hope I see you well. What can I have the pleasure of showing you?" "First rate, Miss Louisa. And how's yourself and Miss Matilda this cold weather?" "I am very well, I thank you, Mr. Sandy." But I regret to say that my sister, Miss Matilda Pussycat, has neuralgia. A fishbone, Mr. Sandy. A fishbone embedded between her wisdom teeth. It has caused a gum boil or abscess, accompanied by swelling. She has eaten nothing but slops for a fortnight. That would disagree with me, said Sandy. Indeed, my poor sister Matilda is becoming as thin as a cat's lug, as the saying is. But the spring fashions are a great divertisement and alleviation, Mr. Sandy. See here what a sweet thing in collars, Mr. Sandy, and these neckties and tabby muslins, quite the latest from Catchester. Is it for yourself or for a lady, Mr. Alexander? Well, it's for a guinea pig, to tell you the truth, Miss Louisa. A guinea pig? Is that a species of wild boar, Mr. Sandy? Does it bite? No, no, a most genteel and timid little animal, Miss Louisa. He is going to play in our circus, and we want to dress him up. Something bright-coloured and tasty. I feel confident that we can supply every requisite article of apparel. What is his complexion, and what character will he impersonate? Inquired Miss Louisa Pussycat. She liked long words. He is lemon and white. We thought of calling him the Sultan of Zanzibar. How about a bandana pocket handkerchief? Can you show me any? Excellent. We have a choice selection. Scarlet and gold would become him admirably, and permit me to suggest a yellow sash and a green turban. Quite the height of fashion, said Miss Louisa Pussycat, opening cardboard boxes and unwrapping packages. I don't think a turban would stick on. He has such a lot of hair. We were going to roll it up on the top of his head, with a hat pin stuck through it. By the by, that reminds me, I am forgetting hairpins. Hairpins with a bend in them, Miss Louisa. He has difficulty in doing up his hair. Dear me, how remarkable. Cannot he have it shingled? But it would be bad for trade. You would be surprised how the sale of hairpins has diminished. We are seldom asked for them. Miss Louisa clattered open numbers of little drawers behind the counter in search of hairpins. Finally, she called through the window into the kitchen. Sister, Sister Matilda, where are the hairpins? Oh, bother, moaned Miss Matilda. I put them away in the attic. They are never wanted. She was heard climbing the staircase. Sandy chose a scarlet, gold, and chocolate-coloured pocket handkerchief and a green sash ribbon. Allow me to recommend the purchase of this hatpin with a glass knob. It will shimmer in the sunshine like a diamond, said Miss Louisa, who was greatly interested in the Sultan's costume. Miss Matilda came downstairs with a packet of hairpins. Here, take them, me-i-ow. Oh, my poor mouth. Her face was swelled like a cabbage, and she had a strip of red flannel pinned round her head. Let me look at it. I have had experience of bones sticking fast, said Sandy. If I were sure you would not scratch me, I believe I could get it out. Indeed, I should be thankful. She mews all night, said Miss Louisa Pussycat. I'll scratch both of you if you touch me, said Matilda. Matilda, this is folly. Open your mouth. Louisa, I won't, replied Matilda. Oh, all right. Please yourself, said Sandy. Will you make out my bill, Miss Louisa? Let me see. 1/2 yard of ribbon at 9 peppercorns a yard, 4 1/2, 1 crystal hat pin, 7 peppercorns, 1 pocket handkerchief, 11 peppercorns. That makes 22 1/2 peppercorns. You have forgotten to charge for the hairpins, Louisa. Hairpins, 1 1/2 peppercorns. That gets rid of the half. Small change is troublesome, is it not, Mr. Alexander? 24 peppercorns exactly, thank you. By the by, what is the smallest size you stock in fancy slippers, Miss Louisa? Kitten 4/4s, Mr. Sandy, said Miss Louisa, reaching up towards the top shelf. I'm afraid that would be too large. No, don't trouble, please, to get them down. I know they would be too large, Miss Louisa. At this point, Miss Matilda again mewed dismally. Meow! Meow! Oh, my poor face. I am out of patience with that wearisome fishbone. Sister, why will you not allow our obliging customer to examine it? What do you want me to do? Asked Matilda crossly. Put on these wash-leather gloves so that you cannot scratch. Sit back in this chair, so. Now open your mouth. Matilda opened it wide with the intention of spitting at them. Instantly, Miss Louisa wedged a spoon between her jaws. Quick, Mr. Sandy! Get the sugar tongs off the tea tray in the parlour. That's it! Quick, before she scratches us! She is kicking her slippers off to scratch!" After a brief struggle, Sandy held up the fishbone in the sugar tongs while Matilda Pussycat made loud howls. "Indeed, Mr. Sandy, the firm is under a great obligation to you. She had not trimmed one hat during the last fortnight, besides disturbing my rest. Pray do us the favour to accept this short length of blue ribbon, which I will enclose in your parcel as a present from us both." "Speak for yourself, sister. I hate dogs," said Matilda Pussycat, spitting and sputtering. "Good morning, Mr. Alexander. Good morning, Mrs. Pussycats." And so Sandy was bowed out at the front door with his parcel. It was quite 3 days before the swelling disappeared, and when the Mrs. Pussycats had friends to tea next Saturday, the sugar tongs were discovered to be somewhat bent. Sandy's purchases were much approved by the rest of the circus company, especially the hat pin. Chapter 6. Zarifa. The dormouse sat upon a hazel twig that lay upon the moss. She stitched busily. She was making the gold and scarlet pocket handkerchief into a robe for Tuppeny. Tuppeny sat opposite to the dormouse, holding 2 sides of the handkerchief while she sewed them together. "It is a long seam, Zarifa. Shall I tell you a story to pass the time?" "That would be lovely, Zarifa. Let me see, what shall it be? I will tell you about Little Mouse." "Who was Little Mouse, Zarifa?" "I don't know, Tuppeny. She was just a little mouse, and she was asked to a wedding. And she said, 'What shall I wear? What shall I wear? There is a hole in my old grey gown, and the shops are shut on a Wednesday.' You see, Tuppeny, it was the day before the wedding, and the shops were not open. So she said, 'What shall I wear? What shall I wear?' And while Little Mouse was wondering, there came to the door of her little house an old, buff, green-striped caterpillar man, with a band across his shoulder and a pack upon his back. And he sang, 'Any tape, any buttons, any needles, any pins, any hooks, any eyes, any silver safety pins, any ribbons, any braid, any thread of any shade, any fine spotty muslin today, mum.' He turned the band over his head and stood the pack open on the doorstep and showed Little Mouse his wares, and she bought fine spotty muslin from the caterpillar man. Little Mouse spread the muslin on her table, and she cut out a mob cap and tippet. Then she said, 'I have scissors and thimble and needles and pins, but no thread. How shall I sew it? How shall I sew it?' Then, by good luck, there came to the door of her house a hairy brown spider with 8 little eyes. He, too, had a pack, a tin box on his back, and his name was Web Spinner. He sang, 'Spinneret, the best you can get, reels and bobbins, bobbins and reels, white thread and black, the best in my pack. Come buy from Web Spinner.' So Little Mouse bought white thread, and she sewed her cap and tippet. 'Hold it straight, please, Tuppeny.' And while Little Mouse was sewing, a large moth came to the door, selling silk spun fine, woven by the silk moth, who'll buy silk of mine. Her silk was apple green, shot with thread of gold and silver. And she had gold cord and silken tassels, too. Little Mouse bought silk enough to make herself a gown, and she trimmed it with gold cord and tassels. And when she was dressed, attired all in her best, she said, 'How can I dance? How can I dance with the fair maids of France, with my little bare feet?' Then the wind blew the grass and whispered in the leaves, and the fairies brought Little Mouse a pair of ladies' slippers, and Little Mouse danced at the wedding. 'That is lovely, Zarifa,' said Tuppeny. 'I would have liked to see the dancing. Who were the fair maids of France, Zarifa?' 'Little prim white flowers with white double ruffs and green stockings.' 'And the ladies' slippers, were they flowers too?' 'Yes, Tuppeny, and so are the lamb's toes and ladies' smocks and fox gloves.' 'Do foxes wear gloves, Zarifa?' 'Perhaps, but their real name is folks' gloves, fairy gloves. The good folk, the fairies, wear them.' 'Tell me about the fairies, Zarifa.' 'Another time I will, Tuppeny. My seam is finished, and Jenny Ferret is boiling the kettle for tea.' Chapter 7. Spring advanced. The caravan wandered along green ways. Primroses were peeping out at the edge of the coppice. The oaks showed a tinge of gold. The wild cherry trees were snow-white with blossom. Beech trees and sycamores were bursting into leaf. Only the ash trees remained bare as in midwinter. The ash is the last to don her green gown, and the first to lose her yellow leaves. A short-lived summer lady. On the topmost bare branch of an ash sat a throstle, singing loud and clear, so clear that he seemed to sing words. "Fly here, fly here, fly here, will he do it, will he do it?" shouted the throstle. Come bobolink, sky high, so, so, so." "Oh, greenwood tree, sweet pretty Leah," warbled a blackbird softly. "Spring is here, shouted the throstle on his treetop. Zarifa and Tuppeny sat listening on a sunny bank below. "Birds, sweet singers all, the coppice is full of birds. Hark to the blackbird in the hawthorn, see his yellow bill." Now he pauses, waiting for an answering blackbird far away in the wood. It reminds me of Bird's Place in spring. Where is Bird's Place, Zarifa? Listen while he sings his song again. The blackbird sang. A soft cloud dimmed the sunshine. A few large raindrops fell. The birds interrupted their singing and flew down onto the grass, all except little Dikey Sparrow singing to his wife while she sat on her blue speckled eggs. "Where is Bird's Place, Zarifa?" "Bird's Place that I remember was in Hertfordshire, long ago when I was young. Perhaps the elms and chestnuts have been felled. The passing swallows say the cedar is blown down." Bird's Place had been the garden of an old manor house. No brick, no stone was standing, but still the straggling damask roses bloomed and garden flowers grew amongst the tall, untidy grass. Currant and gooseberry bushes had run wild in the thicket. They bore the sweetest little berries that the blackbirds loved. No one pruned the bushes or netted them against the birds. No one except birds gathered the strawberries that were scarcely larger than wild white strawberries of the woods. It was a paradise of birds. The outer side of the grove was bounded by a high, close-latticed wooden fence, grey-green and lichen-grown, with rusty nails along the top that kept out village boys and cats. Birds and butterflies and flowers lived undisturbed in that pleasant green wilderness that had once been a garden. And in the middle of the mossy grass plot stood the glory of the garden, the great cedar. Its head towered high above the self-sown saplings of the grove. Its wide-spreading lower branches lay along the mossy grass, where orange-tipped butterflies flitted and red-tailed velvety bees gathered honey from the cowslip flowers. Spring following spring, a pair of missel thrushes built their nest upon a branch low down, and the ringed doves nested and cooed higher up. Starlings and nuthatches reared their broods in holes about the trunk. The great cedar was large enough for all. The grove was carpeted with flowers, ground ivy, forget-me-nots, blue periwinkle. Amongst the bushes grew peonies and sweet-smelling daylilies of the old garden, along with wild flowers, cow parsley and white stitchwort that we called milkmaids, and pink ragged robin and cuckoo pint that is called lords and ladies, and everywhere primroses amongst the moss. There, in a nest thatched with brown chestnut leaves, I was born, I and my little dormouse sister and brother. What were their names, Zarifa? But Zarifa continued, never anywhere have I seen so many flowers or listened to so many birds. Even at night when it was dark, and our mother had closed up the opening of our nest with plaited leaves and grass, even in the deep black velvety darkness came the low, slow note of a bird. I do not think that the nightingale's is actually sweeter than a blackbird's song, but it is weird and wonderful to hear it in the black silence of the night. There are no nightingales up here in the north, Tuppeny, but there are bonny songsters nevertheless. Father Blackbird in the hawthorn bush made me think about Bird's Place. "Tell me about the nest and your little dormouse brother and sister." But Zarifa did not answer. She had fallen fast asleep, dreaming peacefully of springtime in Bird's Place. "Tuppeny! Tuppeny!" called Jenny Ferret. Come and help me to spread the tea things underneath the caravan. Spring showers can be uncommonly wetting. Tuppeny, said Pony William, munching mouthfuls of grass between his words. Tuppeny, do not ask Zarifa questions about her dormouse sister and brother. She suffered from a distressing want of appetite when she first travelled with us. It is unwise to remind her of Adolphus. I am sorry. No, yes, certainly, twittered Tuppeny. I am not two who was Adolphus not to talk about. How many teaspoons will I fetch for you, Mrs. Jenny Ferret? Only 3 teaspoons this time, Tuppeny, for you and me and Zarifa. Pony Billy does not use a spoon, and Paddy Pig drinks his tea without stirring, and Ikey Shepster is not here, thank goodness. Where has he flown to, Jenny Ferret? Up and down and round about, scattering handbill leaves to tell the little folk all about our circus show tomorrow in the morning early. The leaves were green leaves, veined and penciled, like as if marked by leaf-tunneling insects. But the birds and beasts of the woods and fields know how to read them. Mice, squirrels, rabbits, and birds, as well as the larger farm animals, picked up the leaves, and they knew where to look for the circus. Chapter 8. Paddy Pig was an important member of the circus company. He played several parts: the learned pig that could read in spectacles, the Irish pig that could dance a jig, and the clown in spotty calico, and he played the pygmy elephant. It was done in this way. He was the right elephant color, shiny black, and he had the proper flap ears and small eyes. Of course, his nose was not nearly long enough, and he had no tusks. So tusks were shaped from white peeled sticks out of the hedge, and a black stocking was stuffed with moss for a trunk. The tusks and trunk were fastened to a bridle which Paddy Pig wore on his head. His own nose was inside the stocking, so he could move the sham trunk a little bit. One time, when there was too much moss stuffing in the stocking, Paddy Pig started sneezing, and he sneezed so violently that he sneezed the stocking off altogether. Fortunately, this happened at Fold Farm, where the audience was only calves and poultry. They knew so little about elephants that they thought it was part of the performance. Paddy's thin legs were clothed with black calico trousers, long enough to hide his small feet, and he learned to walk with a slow, swinging gait. His worst fault was forgetting to let his tail hang down. Upon his back, he carried a howdah made of a brightly colored tin tea caddy. The lid was open, and inside upon a cushion sat the dormouse, as Princess Zarifa. She had a doll's parasol, a blue dress and a crimson shawl, and a lace handkerchief across her nose with her black, beady eyes peeping over it, provided she was not asleep. After Tuppeny joined Alexander and William's circus, he rode on the elephant's neck in front of the howdah, holding on by the bridle, as Paddy Pig was slippery. Tuppeny's get-up was gorgeous as the Sultan of Zanzibar. He wore the scarlet bandana handkerchief robe, a brass curtain ring round his neck, a green sash with a wooden sword stuck in it, and the crystal-headed pins stuck in his turban of rolled-up hair. And at gala performances, his whiskers were dyed pink. No one would have recognized him for the miserable, ill-used little guinea pig who ran away from his home in the city of Marmalade. And most audiences were completely deceived by the pygmy elephant. It is true there was once some dissatisfaction. It was on an occasion when other pigs were present. During the first part of the program, they behaved well. They squealed with delight when Sandy stood on his head on the back of Billy the pony, and when the pony jumped through a hoop, rolled a barrel about, and went down on one knee. The 4 little pigs applauded vociferously. The circus show. Pony William and Sandy went out of the ring at a canter and disappeared under the canvas flap door of the tent. There was rather a long interval. The fact was a brace button had come off the elephant's trousers, and Zarifa, the dormouse, who did all the mending, was sewing it on again. The 4 little pigs began to fidget and play jinks. They tickled one another and disturbed several hens and 2 rabbits who were sitting in the front row. Then one of them jumped up and ran to the tent and peeped under the flap. Sandy bit his nose. Whether because he had seen something or because his nose smarted, it is certain the 4 little pigs commenced to behave badly. The entrance of the pygmy elephant drew exclamations of awe from the rest of the audience. But the four little pigs sniffed and whispered together. "I say, mister," said a pig to Sandy as he stalked past, leading the elephant by a string. "I say, mister, what's the matter with your elephant's tail?" Sandy ignored the question, but as soon as they were out of hearing at the opposite side of the ring, he whispered to the elephant, "Uncurl it, Paddy, you stupid! Hang your tail down!" The elephant obediently allowed his tail to droop. "I say, Mr. Elephant," said another little pig as the procession marched round a second time. "I say, Mr. Elephant, have a potato." Now Paddy Pig would have liked to accept the potato which they offered to the toe of his stocking trunk, but he was quite unable to grasp it. "There is something funny about that elephant," exclaimed all four little pigs, and they started shouting, "Give us back our peppercorns!" That was their entrance money. "Give us back our peppercorns! We don't believe it is an elephant!" "Do be quiet behind there," expostulated the rabbits and poultry. "Oh, how sweetly pretty! Look at the princess's parasol!" The Princess Zarifa in the howdah beamed down on the admiring hens. "That is not a proper elephant at all. Give us back our peppercorns," shouted all four little pigs, scrambling over the turf seats into the ring and sniffing at Paddy's calico trousers. Then Sandy lost his temper. He barked and he bit the four little pigs and chased them out. The elephant and his riders galloped away under the tent flap in such a hurry that Tuppeny and Zarifa were nearly pulled off by the canvas. Then Jane Ferret was led round in a heavy chain and a large wire muzzle to impersonate the live polecats and weasels mentioned on the posters. Jenny Ferret lived on bread and milk, and she had not a tooth in her head, being in fact cook-housekeeper to the circus company, but the rabbits scrambled hastily into back seats. Of course, that was part of the performance that they had paid for and expected. If they had not had a fright for their peppercorns, they would have been dissatisfied too. In the meantime, the elephant had changed his clothes. He came back as Paddy Pig himself, and he danced a jig to perfection while Sandy fiddled. The four little pigs, quite restored to good humor and polite behavior, applauded loudly and threw potatoes at him, and the audience went home at 4:30 a.m. well satisfied. And 2 hours later, the farmer who owned the four little pigs, when he fed them, remarked that for sure they were doing a deal of grunting and talking together that morning, and there were a lot of little pig foot marks in the lane, but they were shut up all right in the sty when he brought them their breakfast, so he never guessed that they had been to Sandy and William's circus to see the pygmy elephant. Chapter 9. All upon a day in the month of April, the circus company crept slowly through soft green meadows. It was early morning. Long shadows from the woods lay across the grass. Birds sang to greet the rising sun. Ikey Shepster, the starling, whistled and fluttered his wings on the roof of the caravan. Pony Billy bent to the collar. The dew splashed from his shaggy fetlocks as he lifted his feet amongst the wet grass. Paddy Pig toiled between the shafts of the tilt cart, assisted by the panting Sandy, harnessed tandem. "We shall stick fast, Sandy. Let us go back to Pool Bridge." "Yap, yap. We will try the next ford higher up." "Get out of my way," said Pony Billy, coming up behind them, steadily pulling the caravan. They were trying to cross a stream that ran through the middle of the valley. In summer it was a little brook, but spring rains had filled it to the brim. The forget-me-nots waved to and fro up to the waist in water. The primroses on the banks drew up their toes. The violets took a bath. Wilfin Beck was in high flood. Paddy Pig disliked water. The ford which they should have crossed had proved to be a swirling stream instead of a broad, rippling shallow. He wished to turn back and go round by the bridge. The proprietors of the circus refused. "If we cross the stream as far down as Pool Bridge, there will be 2 days' toilsome march through the woods. We broke a spring of the caravan last time we went by the drift road, and the wagoners have been snigging timber since then," objected Sandy. "Go on to the Ellis Ford," said Pony Billy. So Paddy Pig pulled, grunting, through the fast-asleep buttercups and daisies. Zarifah and Tuppeny in the cart were fast asleep too. Jenny Ferret was awake inside the caravan. A pot had hit her on the head when the wheel sank into a drain and caused the caravan to lurch. When Tuppeny woke up and peeped out, the procession had halted and unharnessed beside the beck. Sandy was rolling on the grass. Paddy Pig was smoking a pipe and looking pig-headed, which means obstinate. "You will be drowned," said he to Pony Billy. The pony was pouring the water with his forefeet, enjoying the splashes and wading cautiously step by step further across. "Drowned? Poof!" yapped Sandy, taking a flying leap splash into the middle. He was carried down several yards by the current before he scrambled out on the further bank. Then he swam back. "It's going down," said Sandy, sniffing at a line of dead leaves and sticks which had been left stranded by the receding flood. Pony Billy nodded. "Let us pull round under the alder bushes and wait. Then you will not go back by Poolbridge. What, all across those soft meadows again? No? We will lie in the sun behind this wall and talk to the sheep while we rest." So they pitched their camp by the wall, where there is a water gate across the stream and a drinking place for cattle. Pony Billy's collar had rubbed his neck. Sandy was dog-tired. Jenny Ferret was eager for firewood. Everyone was content except Paddy Pig. He did his share of camp work, but he wandered away after dinner, and he was not to be found at tea time. "Let him alone, and he'll come home," said Sandy. "Bah, bah," laughed some lambs. "Let us alone, and we'll come home and bring our tails behind us." They frisked and kicked up their heels. Their mothers had come down to Wilfin Beck to drink. When their lambs went too near to Sandy, the ewes stamped their feet. They disapproved of strange dogs, even a very tired little dog curled up asleep in the sun. The sheep watched Jenny Ferret curiously. She was collecting sticks and piling them in little heaps to dry. Short, shiny sticks that had been left by the water. Ella Tree Camp. Zarifah and Tuppeny were at their usual occupation, giving Tuppany's hair a good hard brushing. Zarifah was finding difficulty in keeping awake. The pleasant murmur of the water, the drowsiness of the other animals, the placid company of the gentle sheep, all combined to make her sleepy. Therefore it fell to Tuppeny to converse with the sheep. They had lain down where the wall sheltered them from the wind. They chewed their cud. "Very fine wool," said the eldest ewe, Tibby Woolstocket, after contemplating the brushing silently for several minutes. "It's coming out a little," said Tuppeny, holding up some fluff. "Bring it over here, bird," said Tibby to the starling, who was flitting from sheep to sheep and running up and down on their backs. "Wonderfully fine. It is finer than your Scotch wool, Maggie Dinmont," said Tibby Woolstocket to a black-faced ewe with curly horns who lay beside her. "Aye, it's vara fine, and it's lang," said Maggie Dinmont approvingly. "It would make lovely yarn for mittens. Do you keep the combings?" asked another ewe, named Habitrot. "I have a little bag. There is only a little in it. Yes, please. I put it in a little bag," twittered Tuppeny, much flattered by their approbation. "Bah! Bah! Black sheep! 3 bags full!" sang the lambs, kicking up their heels. Now, young lambs should be seen, not heard. Take care, you will fall in," said Tibby Woolstocket severely. 3 more ewes hurried up and gave their lambs a good hard bat with their heads. But the lambs minded nothing. The ewes, whose names were Ruth Twinter, Hannah Bright Eyes, and Belle Lingcropper, stepped down to the water side to drink. Then they lay down by the others and considered Tuppeny. "His hair is as fine as rabbit wool and longer. Rabbit wool is sadly short to spin," said Habitrot. "Save all the combings in your little bag in case you pass this way again." "You were not with the circus last time they camped by the Ellers," said Tibby Woolstocket. "What may your name be, little guinea pig man?" "Tuppeny." "Tuppeny, a very good name," said the sheep. At this moment a bunch of lambs galloped across the meadow with such a rush that they nearly overran the bank into the water. Their mothers were quite angry. "A perfect plague they are. But nevertheless we would be sad without the little dears. Now lie down and be quiet." or you will get into the same scrape as Daisy and Double." But the lambs only raced away faster. Zarifa had been awakened by the disturbance. "Who were Daisy and Double? We love hearing stories, Tibby Woolstockit. Do tell us." Tibby Woolstockit turned her mild, bright eye on the little dormouse. "Willingly I will tell you. There is not much to tell. Every spring for 24 years we have told that story to our lambs, but they take little heed. Daisy and Double were the twin lambs of my great-grandmother, Dinah Woolstockit of Brackenthwaite, who grazed in these pastures, even where we now are feeding. The coppice has been cut thrice since then. But still the green shoots grow again from the stools, and the bluebells ring in the wood, and Wilfin Beck sings over the pebbles, year in and year out, and swirls in spring flood after the melting snow. That April, when Daisy and Double played in this meadow, Wilfin was full to overflowing, as high as it is now. Take care, you thoughtless lambs, take care. But little heed will you take, no more than Daisy and Double, who made of the flood a playmate. For it was carrying down sticks and brown leaves and snow broth, as the trout fishers call the cakes of white fairy foam that float upon the flood water in early spring. Daisy and Double saw the white foam, and they thought it was fun to race with the snow broth, they on the meadow bank and the foam upon the water, until it rushed out of sight behind this wall. Then back they raced upstream till they met more snow broth coming down, then turned and raced back with it. But they watched the water, instead of their own footsteps, splash in tumbled Daisy, and before he could stop himself, splash in tumbled Double, and they were whirled away in the icy cold water of Wilfin Beck. "Bah, bah!" cried Daisy and Double, bobbing along amongst the snow broth. Very sadly they bleated for their mother, but she had not seen them fall in. She was feeding quietly by herself. Presently she missed them, and she commenced to run up and down, bleating. They had been carried far away out of sight beyond the wall, beyond another meadow. Then Wilfin Beck grew tired of racing. The water eddied round and round in a deep pool, and laid the lambs down gently on a shore of smooth sand. They staggered onto their feet and shook their curly coats. "I want my mammy! Bah, bah!" sobbed Daisy. "I'm very cold! I want my mammy!" bleated Double. But bleat as they might, their mother Dinah Woolstockit could not hear them. The bank above their heads was steep and crumbly. Green fronds of oak fern were uncurling. Primroses and wood anemones grew amongst the moss, and yellow catkins swung on the hazels. When the lambs tried to scramble up the bank, they rolled back in danger of falling into the water. They bleated piteously. After a time there was a rustling amongst the nut bushes. Someone was watching them. This person came walking slowly along the top of the bank. It wore a woolly shawl pulled forward over its ears, and it leaned upon a stick. It seemed to be looking straight in front of it as it walked along, at least its nose did, but its eyes took such a sharp squint sideways as it passed above the lambs. "Brr, brr," said this seeming woolly person with a deep-voiced bleat. "Bah, bah, we want our mammy," cried Daisy and Double down below. "My little dears, come up, brr, brr, come up to me." "Go away," cried Daisy, backing to the water's edge. "You are not our mammy! Go away!" cried Double. "Oh, real mammy, come to us!" Then the woolly person reached out a skinny black arm from under the shawl and tried to claw hold of Daisy with the handle of its stick. Its eyes were sharp and yellow, and its nose was shiny black. "Bah, bah!" screamed Daisy, struggling and rolling down the bank away from the crook. "Bah, bah! Bad lambs, I'll have you yet!" But what was that noise? A welcome whistle and shout. "Hey, Jack, good dog, go seek them out, lad!" The wily one threw off the shawl and ran with a long, bushy tail behind him, and a big, strong, wall-eyed collie came bounding through the coppice on the track of the fox. When he came to the top of the bank, he stopped and looked over at Daisy and Double with friendly barks. Then John Shepherd arrived and came slithering down the bank between the nut bushes. He lifted up Daisy and Double and carried them to their mother. But it is in vain that we tell this tale to our lambs from generation to generation. They are thoughtless and giddy as of old. Well for us sheep that they're sturdy Kent and collie true, they will defend the tarry woo. Sing us the spinning song that the shepherd lasses sang when they sat in the sun before the shealing while they cleaned the tarry fleeces, carding and spinning. Tarry woo, oh tarry woo is ill to spin. Card it wheel, oh card it wheel ere you begin. When it's carded, rolled and spun, then your work is but half done. When it's woven, dressed and clean, it is clothing for a queen. It's up, you shepherds, dance and skip, o'er the hills and valley trip. The king that royal sceptre sways has no sweeter holy days. Sing to the praise of tarry woo, sing to the sheep that bear it too. Who'd be king? None here can tell it when a shepherd lives so well and pays his due with an honest heart and tarry woo. Chapter 10. The sheep lay quietly chewing their cud. Tuppeny fidgeted. When will Paddy Pig come back? I don't know, said Jenny Ferret crossly. I'm only an old body. I'm wanting my tea. Ring the bell, Jenny Ferret, said Sandy. She clanged a little handbell up and down. The lambs sprang away, startled. The sheep lay unconcerned. The sheep talked to one another. A bell? Sheep bells are sweeter. Ruth Twinter, do you remember the down ram telling us about the Cotswold flocks? How with each flock 2-3 sheep go before, wearing bells. When they lift their heads from nibbling and step forward, the bells ring, ting, 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 tong, 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 tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. Why has Mistress Helis never given us bells? She will do anything for us sheep. I know not, answered Ruth Twinter. I can tell you from the wisdom of age, said the old blue ewe. 16 years gone by since first she nibbled the clover. I can tell you. It is because we Herdwicks range singly and free upon the mountainside. We are not like the silly Southron sheep that flock after a bellwether. The Cotswold sheep feed on smooth, sloping pastures near their shepherd. Said the peat ewe, blindy, our northern winds would blow away the sheep bell's feeble tinkle. From the low grounds to us comes a sound that carries further, old John calling with a voice like a bell, calling his sheep to hay across the frozen snow in winter. Up spoke a dark Lonscale ewe, each to their own, the green fields of the south for them, the high fell tops for us who used to wander and find our way alone through mist and trackless waste. We need no human guide to set us on our way. No guide nor star nor compass to set us a beeline to Eskdale, said the bright-eyed Allenby ewe, her that had knocked her teeth out when she tumbled down Score Fell. 2 of you Lonscales were runaways in spite of old John's hay. Who can langle the clouds or the wind? If we want to come back, we will. I wish our pig would do so, said Pony William. Ring that bell again. The sheep resumed their conversation. Where was it that they drove you, Hannah Bright-Eyes? Asked the little ewe, Isabel. Nay, I didn't stay to learn its place name. I came straight back to my heath on the fell. It was 8 miles to Corkermouth Market, and 12 beyond. What short-wooled sheep could do that? Said Habitrot. It takes strong hemp to langle us. We want no bells and collars, said Blindy. They would get caught on rocks and snags. A sad death it must be to die fast, said Hilltop Queenie plaintively. I would not like to be fast, like poor little Hoggy in the wood. He had eaten sticks and moss as far as he could reach, but he had not sense to bite through the cruel bramble that held him, twisted round his woolly ribs. Grown sheep can get crag fast, said Bell Lingcropper. I was fast in Falcon Crag. I knew each yard of slippery screes, and the chimneys or rifts that lead up to the high ledges. A summer drought had parched the herb. Only where water oozed from the rock face it was green. I went up and up, 100 feet, always feeding upwards. Down below the treetops quivered in the heat, and a raven circled slowly. Dizziness is unknown to Herdwick sheep. I fed along a narrow ledge. A rock gave way beneath my feet. It clattered down into the abyss. I sprang across the gap and went on feeding. The grass was longer. It seemed as though no sheep had bitten it. Nor had we. Our turning spot had been upon the stone that fell. I could not turn. I lived 30 days upon the ledge, eating the grass to the bone, parched by the sun and wind. Only a welcome thunder shower brought moisture that I licked on the stones. I bleated. No one heard me except the raven. In the 4th week, a shepherd and his dog saw me from below. He shouted. I rose to my feet. He watched me for a time, then he went away and left me. Next day he came again and shouted. I staggered along the ledge. Again he left me, fearing that I might leap away from him to death if he approached too near. On the last day, 3 shepherds came and watched. I was too weak to rise. I dozed upon the ledge. They climbed round the hillside, and they came sideways above the crag. I could hear their voices faintly, talking overhead. One came down on a rope. He swung inward onto the ledge and tied another rope to me, a woolly fleece and rattling bones. They drew me up. Still I can feel the hot breeze and smell the wild sage as they slung me past the face of the rock. I was carried to the farm and given warm milk. Within a week I was well. A brave shepherd truly, one who would go through fire and water and air to save his sheep. Our shepherds face rough times, said White Fanny. Dost remember hearing tell of the lad who parted from his fellow shepherd when the early winter sunset was going down over the snow? The other one came home at tea time, but he did not come. His folks turned out to seek for him. Some went along the tops, others searched below the crags. There they saw marks of a rush, and his collie Bess watching by a snowdrift, just in time, just and so. Our men take risks with their eyes open. They know that they cannot live underneath snow like us. Then Ruth Twinter spoke up cleverly. I and 3 sisters were buried 23 days beside the Dalehead wall. Naught to brag on, said the Lonscale ewe scornfully. Could you not feel it coming, or were the gates shut? Nay, they stood open. The wind went round suddenly after a plash of rain. A fall came out of the east. Then it turned to frost. I doubt you were a twinter or a 2-shear at most, said the blue ewe. The low east brings the heaviest falls. Indeed, and indeed we were hurrying, said Ruth Twinter. We came down the fell, strung out in single file. I mind me we met a fox at Blue Gill going up. Then we met a blizzard that blew us into the wall, a blinding yellow storm of dithering powdery flakes. Bell Lingcropper's mother went over a bank into the beck. She was dashed against the stones and drowned. The rest of us cowered by the wall. We were quickly snowed over. It drifted level with the cams. We stirred ourselves under the drift, like the Modi warps and field voles. Our breath melted the snow somewhat. It caked over our heads, a blue-green frozen vault. We ate all the bent grass that we could reach, all the grey moss on the wall. The dogs found us at last, dogs scratching, and shepherds prodding the drift with the long handles of their crooks. You would feel it colder when you came out. Yes, said Ruth Twinter. It was warm and stuffy under the snow. Although we came out into spring sunshine, the air outside felt colder than it did inside the great white drift that lay on the grass along the Dalehead wall. We came out quite lish and cheerful. 2 of us never heard the cuckoo again. Such things will happen, said Ruth Twinter placidly, turning on her shoulder and chewing her cud. Said old Blindy, it is a sign of snow when the sheep come down to the gates. Sing us the rhyme, Hannah Bright Eyes. Oh, who will come open this great heavy gate? The hill fox yaps loud and the moon rises late. There's snow on the fell and there's hay at the farm. Not that us elder ewes reckon much of hay, not unless we had learned to eat it while we were hoggy lambies. You had cause to be grateful to the sheepdogs, Ruth Twinter, said Sandy. Yes, the dogs are our good friends, sometimes over rough, but faithful. They get crag fast too, said Sandy. They do, but they make such a fine halloo-baloo that they are more quickly found. There was one that made a bit of noise too loud. That happened in a blizzard. Poor dog, its position was so bad that it could neither get down nor up, and it could not be rescued with ropes. Its master tried in vain to get it out. It cried on the shelf for several days in sleet and biting wind. cried so pitifully that the master said he would shoot it with his own hand before he would watch it die of cold. He went home for his gun. When he was returning with the gun, he met Collie Allen in the road. All dogs are not so lucky. Our Brill's mother got cragged and killed in Langdale. It is always the foremost best hound that goes over with the fox, said Sandy. Has Brill come back to the farm? Yes, said the sheep. The hunting season is over. The pack is disbanded. The hounds and terriers have gone back to the farms for the summer. If all the terriers are as cross as Twig, they can stay away, said Sandy, shaking his ears. Our collie Nip can tackle a fox. She has led the hounds before now, for the first short burst up the quarry pastures. She can run, can old Nip. Foxes are hateful, said Tibby Woolstockit, stamping. Come here, you lambs, come here, you are straying too far off. Do you remember, Ruth Twinter, when you and I were feeding above Woondale? We looked over the edge into Broad Howe. Far down below us we could see 3 little fox cubs playing in the sun. Sometimes one would grab another's tail like a kitten. Then one would sit up and scratch its ear, full of fleas, remarked Sandy. Then another would roll over on its back like a fat little puppy dog. The vixen was curled up asleep on top of a big boulder stone. Presently one of our shepherds appeared a long way off, walking along the other side of the valley. The vixen slipped quietly off the rock, stole away over Threstthwaite Mouth into Hartsop, a mile away from the cubs. She seemed to give no sound nor signal, but the little foxes vanished into the boran. Very pretty, charming. I wonder how many lambs' tails and legs there were in the larder, said Hannah Bright Eyes sourly. They took over 30 one spring, big lambs too, old enough to be tailed and marked. They had skinned a lamb with Mistress Helis's mark on its jacket, and there was part of one of Jimmy's ducks. I love the high places, said Belle Lingcropper. I remember when I was a lamb, I and my brother twin were feeding on Pavey Ark with our mother. We were feeding part way up. 2 climbing men came up behind us and below. I do not think they knew that they were driving us before them. We climbed and climbed in the chimney that had scarcely foothold for a goat. We reached a shelf some 4 feet from the top. Our mother jumped out nimbly. My brother followed her with difficulty. Time and again I jumped, only to fall back upon that ledge above the precipice. Our mother bleated overhead. She moved to a spot where the wall of rock was lower. I followed sideways along the ledge, looking up at her and bleating. At the 3rd trial I jumped out. There was sweet grazing on the top. Cool is the air above the craggy summit. Clear is the water of the mountain Keld. Green grows the grass in droughty days beneath the brackens. What though the hailstorms sweep the fell in winter, through tempest, frost, or heat? We live our patient days' allotted span. Wild and free as when the stone men told our puzzled early numbers, untamed as when the Norsemen named our grassings in their stride. Our little feet had ridged the slopes before the passing Romans. On through the fleeting centuries, when fresh blood came from Iceland, Spain, or Scotland, stubborn, unchanged, unbeaten, we have held the stony waste. Dunmail, Falls, Blue Joe, Wastewater Will and Thistle, Rawlins, Swalla Wonder, Old Pride of Helvellyn, pass the tough lineage forward, keeps the tarry woo unsoftened, hold the proud ancient heritage of our Herdwick sheep. Chapter 11. Now one more tale before the sun goes down. Come, Habitrot, tell us of the spinner, her that you are named after. Habitrot, the sheep, drew her feet beneath her comfortably and thus commenced. Long, long ago, long before the acorn ripened that has grown into yonder oak, there lived a bonny lass at the farm in the dale, and a yeoman from Brigsteer came to court her. Her parents were willing for the match, and bonny Annot liked the yeoman well, a brave, handsome fellow and a merry. He had sheep on the fell, kine in the byre, a horse in the stall, a dry flag-roofed house, and many a broad acre. For dower her father would give her a cow and a stirk, a score of sheep, and 10 silver merks. Her mother would give her her blessing, but not without shame and a scolding. Now this was the trouble. 2 elder daughters, when they married, had had great store of blankets and sheets. for it was a good old custom in the dale that all menseful lasses should spin flax and wool and have the yarn woven by the webster, so that they had ready against their bride-wain a big oak bedding chest well filled with linen and blankets. But this youngest daughter, Bonnie Annot, was both the laziest and the bonniest. Not 1 pound of wool had she carded, not 1 hank of tow had she spun. Shut thee in the wool loft with thy spindle, go spin, idle Annot, go spin. Bonnie Annot spun from morning till noon, from noon till the shadows grew long, but it was later day to commence to spin. My back is tired, my fingers are stiff, my ears they drum with the hum of the wheel. Oh, well and away to Pringle Wood to meet my love, sighed Annot. She left her wheel, she lifted the latch, she stole away while the cows were milking. In Pringlewood across the beck the hazels grew as still they grow, and windflowers and violets and primroses twinkled. Bonnie Annot wandered through the wood. She knelt on the moss to gather a posy, and herself was the sweetest of flowers that grow. Blue were her eyes like the wood violets blue, fair were her locks like the marybuds gold, and her red and white dimples like roses on snow. She bent to the flowers, and she heard a low humming. Was it horses' hoofs on the fell road from Brigsteer? Trot, trot, Habitrot, trot, 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 trot. She lifted her head and she listened, but no. She knelt on the moss, and again she heard humming. Was it bumbly bees storing their honey below? She peeped between stones and mossy hazel stumps, beneath a hollow stone, beneath a mossy stump. And there underground she saw a wee woman spinning, went her wheel, spinning, spinning, spinning. "Hey, Bonnie Annot," said the little grey woman, "why art thou so pale and heavy-eyed?" "With spinning, good woman, with spinning." "Spinning is for winter nights, Bonnie Annot. Why spinnest thou now in the pleasant spring?" "Because I was idle, I now must spin in haste. Alack! My sheets and blankets are to spin." She told her tale and cried, "Dry your eyes and listen, Bonnie Annot," said the little grey woman. "Eyes so blue and tender were never meant for tears. Lazy thou mayest be, but I know thee kind and true. Step up to the wool loft in the moonlight, tie the bags of tow and wool upon the pony, bring them to old Habitrot, and she will do thy spinning." Even while Annot thanked her, there came the clink of horseshoes along the stony road from Brigsteer. Bonnie Annot forgot her troubles and sprang to meet the yeoman. But when he rode away next morning, her troubles recommenced. Her mother, with a hazel rod, drove her up the steps to the loft. "It wants but 3 weeks to thy wedding. Go spin, idle daughter, go spin." Many were the fleeces and the bags of wool and flax, so many that when she took away a load upon her pony, the wool was never missed, not although she made 4 journeys to and fro from Pringle Wood. Bring more to old Habitrot. Thou shalt have wealth of sheets and blankets." Down below, under the hollow stone, there was the noise of spinning. Hum, hum, trot, 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 Habitrot, trot, trot. Little way made Bonnie Annot with her own spinning in the wool loft, yet she sang while she turned the wheel. What though the thread broke and the flax was lumpy? Still she sang and laughed while she spun. In the evening she stole away once more to Pringle Wood, riding barebacked on her pony. "Lead him to the Colludi stone, up with the bags and bundles. Wealth for thy wedding, Bonnie Annot. She that spoke kindly to old Habitrot shall never want for blankets." Bonnie Annot's mother expected but little in the morning. She climbed up to the wool loft with the broomstick in her hand. "Say, hast thou spun e'er a pound of wool, or a hank of tow, lazy daughter?" Wonders will never cease. Which of her sisters had ever had such yarn for the weaver, worsted so strong and even, or thread so fine and fair? Her fame as a spinner was spread beyond the dale. It came to the ears of the yeoman. He too had great store of white wool and flax. Said her mother, "See what a housewife thou art marrying. Surely she will fill thy linen press and deck thy cupboard." But Bonnie Annot hung her head and pouted her lip, thought she, "He will keep me at spinning forever." The wedding day came. They were a handsome pair. The sun shone, the bells were rung. All the folk in the dale came to the kirk to see them married, and the wedding feast at the farm was thronged and merry. The trenchers were piled with meat. There were cakes and pies and pasties. The jugs of ale went round, and bonny Annot kissed the cup. Someone knocked at the house door. The bride sprang to open it. At her feet upon the threshold stood a little ugly woman, a little grey old woman, with a kindly crooked smile. "Good dame, come in, welcome to my wedding feast." Bonny Annot led her to the table, set chair and footstool and cushion, filled trencher and cup. The weddingers looked askance at the unbidden guest. They pointed and they whispered. But still the bonny bride served her, filling trencher and cup. The old woman munched and munched and munched. Now the bride's youngest brother was a merry knave. "Hey, little woman," said he, "why hast thou such an ugly, ugly mouth, wide and awry with a long flabby lip?" "Whist, whist, Henry," said bonny Annot, pulling him. The little woman smiled awry. "With spinning, my lad, with spinning." She wet her finger on her ugly, flabby lip and made as if she twisted thread. Her thumb was broad and flat. "Oh, ho," said the yeoman, "is that what comes of spinning?" He kissed bonny Annot's cherry lips and tapered fingers. "Oh, ho, so that comes of spinning." The old woman munched and munched and munched. "Hey, little woman," said Henry, "why is thy back so bent, thine eyes so bleared, and thy foot so flat?" "With spinning, my lad, with spinning." She beat her broad foot up and down upon the flags as though she trod the treadle. "Trot, trot, Habitrot, trot, 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 trot." "So ho," said the yeoman, who was very fond of dancing. "So ho, Habitrot. If that comes of spinning, my wife's foot shall never treadle. No, no, Habitrot. When we have wool and flax to spin, my wife shall dance and sing. We will send for Habitrot. Habitrot shall do our spinning. We will send for Habitrot." "That story," said Pony Billy, "has no moral. But it is very pretty," said Zariffa, the dormouse, suddenly wakening up. Chapter 12. A chill breath rose from the water. The daisies closed their petals. "We will say good night," said the sheep. "It is too cold for our lambs to sleep beside the stream. Good night, little dormouse. All friends, good night." The sheep, stately and peaceful, moved up the pasture, feeding as they went. Their lambs gamboled beside them. The last beams of the setting sun shone again upon the flock when they reached the heights. Zariffa drew her fur cloak closer. Tuppeny warmed his hands at the fire. "I wish Paddy Pig would come back. Do you think he has fallen in like the lambs?" "Not he. He is too much afraid of water." Tuppeny still looked across anxiously at the wood. "I did think I heard a pig squeal while Habitrot was telling us that nice tale. Would anything bite him in Pringle Wood?" Sandy sat up. "Why did you not say so before? No, nothing would bite him." "I should not choose to spend a night in Pringle Wood myself," remarked Jenny Ferret. "Why?" inquired Tuppeny. "Why don't you like Pringlewood? It was a kind fairy that helped bonny Annot in the story. Does she live there yet?" "Tuppeny," said Pony William, "do you not remember that I observed that the tale recounted by Habitrot had no moral?" "But it was very pretty," said Zariffa, who had been to sleep again. Supper was eaten, Tuppeny and Zariffa were put to bed. Pony Billy lay down behind the wall. Sandy went to sleep in his straw underneath the caravan. But neither at supper, at bedtime, nor at breakfast time was there any sign of Paddy Pig. "It is useless to wait any longer," said Pony Billy next morning. "The flood has gone down 8 inches. We can cross the ford. If Tuppeny really heard Paddy Pig squealing in Pringle Wood, we are more likely to find him on the other side of the stream. It is a mystery how he got over dry shod, and he hates getting wet," said Jenny Ferret. "The wood itself is a mystery," said Pony Billy. "We had better get through it by daylight. Zariffa, you know the reputation of Pringle Wood. Be very careful that Tuppeny does not eat anything in there." "Why, Zariffa?" asked Tuppeny. "It is undesirable to taste anything that grows in the wood." "Is it fairies?" "Hush," said Zariffa. We are going to cross. Swim over with the rope, Sandy, and steady us. Pony Billy took the caravan safely through the water, which was up to the axle trees. Then he unharnessed himself and came back to fetch the tilt cart. As there was no Paddy Pig to drag the cart, it had to be left behind for the present time, under an ella tree beside the stream on the outskirts of the wood. Tuppeny and Zarifa and the luggage were packed into the caravan to ride with Jenny Ferret. The fairy hill of oaks. It took them 4 long hours to go through Pringle Wood. Round and round and round they went by narrow mossy tracks, always going round about, always pulling steadily. And yet the wood was no great size, just a little fairy hill of oaks. The ground beneath the trees was covered with bluebells, blue as the sea, blue as a bit of sky come down. So steep downhill were the mossy banks that Sandy had to put the slipper brake under the wheel to prevent the caravan from running away on top of Pony Billy, who was nearly flung upon his nose. Then it was uphill, and Pony Billy toiled and tugged. Foam flecked his bit and shoulders. His brown leather harness creaked. He was so hot with pulling that he was all in a lather. And no sooner had he gained the top of a bank than it was downhill again, just as steep, and the caravan was overrunning him and pressing into the breeching straps. Pony Billy snorted. His hooves slipped on the moss, and if he left the track, the bluebells were so thick that it was difficult to trample through them. They passed a bed of white anemone flowers. "Why, surely," said Sandy, "we have passed this spot already twice." Pony Billy snorted again and scrambled forward. A shower of oak apples from the trees above pelted about his ears and rattled on the roof of the caravan. They hopped on the moss like live things. They bounced like a shower of pelting hailstones. "Look, Zarifa, what beauties!" cried Tuppeny, trying to catch them. "Red oak apples in April. Have they been stored all winter in a wood mousie's cupboard?" "Throw them away, Tuppeny!" exclaimed Zarifa and Jenny Ferret. "Throw them away over your left shoulder." More and more oak apples came pattering and pelting. Tuppeny played ball with them, catching them and tossing them back. "This one has been bitten, Zarifa. Are they good to eat?" "What is that I hear?" said Pony Billy, laying his ears back. "None of you on any account may eat anything that grows in Pringle Wood." Instantly, another pelting shower of oak apples came rattling like a hailstorm about Pony Billy's mane and back. He broke into a gallop, trampling through the bluebells, and this time he succeeded in dragging the caravan clear away out of Pringle Wood. The sunshiny open meadow was refreshing after the somber shade of the trees. Cattle and sheep were feeding peacefully. Lambs frisked. Swallows skimmed low over the buttercups that powdered Pony Billy's hooves with dusty gold. He drew the caravan across the cheerful green grass. He took it through a white gate into a lane, which they followed down to Coddlin Croft Farm. It was a pleasant sunny spot where the circus had camped before, only it is rather too near the world of the big folk and their cats and dogs and hens and cocks. "Especially cocks," said Sandy, stiffening his tail. "There is no help for it," said Pony Billy. "We cannot proceed further and leave Paddy Pig behind us, lost. Besides, I must go back for the tilt cart." Tuppeny twittered dolefully. "You will be lost too, Mr. Pony William." "I shall not," said Pony Billy. "I am not a pig-headed fool of a pig." "Now, Zarifa and Tuppeny," said Sandy, "come along. I am sorry to say you will have to be shut up all the time while we stop at Coddlin Croft. It will not be safe to let you out with all these strange dogs and cats. Here they come. Cows, calves, dogs, cats, poultry, all the farm animals." Chapter 13. The homestead of Coddlin Croft was dominated by Charles, our cock, a silver campine with handsome white neck hackles, finely barred and spotted breast, and a magnificent tail. He also had a big red comb and spurs. Besides Charles, there was a turkey cock of large size, and a sow still larger, and a cat and 3 farm dogs. Charles treated them all alike with contempt. When the caravan arrived in the lane, Charles and the turkey were having one of their usual combats. Charles was dancing round and chirtling. cluck, cuck, 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 jumping and spurring at bubbly Jock's painfully red wattles and tassels. The turkey was bursting with rage. He scrunched the tips of his wings along the gravel, which spoilt nothing but his own feathers. Whenever he got a chance, he trod heavily upon the spot where Charles had recently stood. Charles, in the meantime, had darted between the turkey's legs. When Charles became short of breath, he slipped nimbly through the narrow bars of an iron gate and pretended to be picking up titbits in full view of the maddened turkey cock, who was unable to follow him. Then he scratched up dirt and crowed. Charles and Sandy never hit it off very well. They both had a habit of scratching up the earth, and they mutually irritated one another. But all the same, Charles graciously did the honors of Coddlin Croft and invited the company into the orchard through a broken gate. The orchard which gives Coddlin Croft Farm its name is a long, rambling strip of ground, with old bent pear trees and apple trees that bear ripe little summer pears in August and sweet Coddlin apples in September. At the end nearest to the buildings there are clothes props, hen coops, tubs, troughs, old oddments, and pigsties that adjoin the calf hulls and cow byres. The back windows of the farmhouse look out nearly level with the orchard grass. Little back windows of diamond panes not made to open. The far end of the orchard is a neglected, pretty wilderness with mossy old trees, elder bushes, and long grass, handy for a pet lamb or two in spring and for the calves in summer. At this time of year, a north country April, the pear blossom was out and the early apple blossom was budding. The snowdrops that had been a sheet of white, white as the linen sheets bleaching on the drying green, had passed, and now there were daffodils in hundreds. Not the big, bunchy, tame ones that we call butter and eggs, but the little wild daffodillies that dance in the wind. Through the broken gate at top of Coddlin Croft Orchard came Pony Billy with the caravan. He drew it up comfortably in shelter of Farmer Hodgson's haystack, which stood, foursquare and prosperous, half in the orchard and half in the field. "Only, Jenny Ferret, if I put the caravan here, you must promise not to light a fire. We must not burn Farmer Hodgson's hay for him." "And how will I boil the kettle without a fire? Take us further down the orchard near the well, behind the boar-tree bushes." "All right," agreed Pony Billy, pulling into the collar again. "Perhaps it would be safer. I can come up to the stack by myself for a bite." "Cluck, cur, cuck, cuck," said Charles. "I recommend that flat place between the pigsty and the middenstead." "Yes, indeed, cluck, cluck. There are lots of worms if you scratch up the manure," clucked Selina Pickercorn. "Are they going to put up a tent?" asked the calves. "Oh yes, lots of nice red worms," clucked Tappy Toory and Chucky Partlet. "What's that funny old woman they call Jenny Ferret? She has got whiskers?" asked an inquisitive cat, sitting on the roof of the pigsty. "Quack, quack. Stretch your long neck and peep in at the window, Dilly Duckling. I cannot see. Quack, quack. I cannot see anything through the curtains." "Gobble, gobble, gobble," shouted the turkey cock, strutting after Charles. Sandy curled his tail tightly. "Go further down beyond the boar-tree bushes, Pony William, further away from the farmyard." When the caravan had been drawn into position, it became necessary for Sandy to do a large, loud, determined barking all round in order to disperse the poultry. After pitching camp in the orchard, Pony Billy and Sandy held an anxious consultation. "Did you notice anything while we were coming through the wood?" "Yes, pigs' trotter marks." "How many times did we go round and round that hill, Pony William?" "We would be going round it yet if I had not gone widdershins. What shall we do about Paddy Pig?" "I'm going back to fetch him." "What, into Pringle Wood?" "Yes," said Pony Billy. "But first I want a saddle and bridle, and look whether my packet of fern seed is safe, for I shall have to go amongst the big folk in broad daylight." Pony Billy borrowed several things by permission of the farm dogs, Roy, Bobs, and Matt, who were lying lazily in the sun before the stable door. He asked for the loan of a nosebag containing chopped hay and straw and Uveco, also for 2 pounds of potatoes, and a saddle and bridle, and for the chest strap with brass ornaments belonging to the cart harness. There were 4 brass lockets on the strap, a swan, a galloping horse, a Catherine wheel, and a crescent. The last named is a charm that has been worn by English horses since the days of the Crusaders. The strap was too long, it swung between his knees, but Pony Billy felt fortified and valiant. "Do you think you will be chased?" asked the dogs. "I shall not. I am going to the smithy to have my shoes turned back to front." "Our mare Magret is at the smithy," said Bobs. "You will have to go past the back door and the wash-house if you want potatoes," said Matt. "Nobody can see me," said Pony Billy. He clattered across the flags, bold in possession of fern seed and invisibility. Mrs. Hodgson, inside the house, called to her maidservant, "Look out at the door, Grace. Is that the master I hear coming home with the mare?" "I hear summat, but I see naught," answered Grace, perplexed. Pony Billy started on his quest. The farm dogs went to sleep again in the sun. Sandy, with his tail uncurled, trailed back disconsolately to the orchard camp. The ducks and calves had wandered away, but Charles and his inquisitive hens were still in close attendance and conversing endlessly. The conversation was about losing things. Zarifa's scissors were missing. Jenny Ferret, as usual, suspected Ikey Shepster, the starling. He was not present to deny the charge. He had flown off foraging with the sparrows. "Losses," said Charles sententiously. "Losses occur in the best regulated establishments. Likewise fines, but fines are less frequent, and therefore more noteworthy. One afternoon I and my hens were promenading in the meadow. I heard Tappy Turi, that bird with the rose comb, clucking loudly in the ash pit. I inquired of Selina Pickercorn whether Tappy Turi had laid an egg. Selina replied that it seemed improbable, as Tappy Turi had already laid one that morning in the hen house. But hens are fools enough to do anything. I ordered Selina to proceed to the ash pit, to ask Tappy Turi whether she had laid a second egg or not. When one hen runs, all the other hens run too, being idiots. Cluck, cur, cuck, cuck, cuck. "Oh, Charles, Charles," remonstrated Selina and Chucky Partlet coyly. "Aggravating idiots," repeated Charles, who did not believe in encouraging pride amongst female poultry. As the whole of my hens continued to cluck in the ash pit in total disregard of my commands to come out, I stalked across the field and I looked in. I said, "What are you doing, Tappy Turi? You are a perfect sweep. Selina Pickercorn, you are equally dirty. Chucky Doddy, you are even worse. Come out of the ash pit," they replied, all clucking together. "Oh, Charles, do look what a treasure we have found. But none of us know how to stick it on because it has no safety pin." They showed me Mrs. Hodgson's big Cairngorm brooch that had been missing for a fortnight. They asked me if it was worth £100. "Cock-a-doodle-doo! £100 indeed," said Charles, swelling with scorn. "I told them it was absolutely worthless to us who wear no collars, not worth so much as 1 grain of wheat. Cluck, cur, cuck, cuck, cuck. Hens always were noodles and always will be. Ask them to tell you the tale of the Demerara sugar." "That," said Selina Pickercorn, quite unabashed. "Oh, that happened long ago when we were inexperienced young pullets. Besides, it was all along of the parrot." "Pray explain to us the responsibility of the parrot," said Sandy. 5 or 6 hens all commenced to cluck at once. Charles interjected cock-a-doodles. Consequently, their explanation became somewhat mixed. Therefore, it must be understood that this story, like the corn in their crops, is a digest. Chapter 14. Upon fine days in spring, the parrot's cage was set out of doors upon top of the garden wall, opposite the farmhouse windows. In the intervals of biting its perch and swinging wrong side up, the parrot addressed remarks to the poultry in the yard below. The words which it uttered most frequently in the hearing of those innocent birds were, "Demerara sugar, Demerara sug, dem, pretty Polly." The chickens listened attentively. When the chickens were feathered, they were taken to live in a wooden hut on wheels in the stubble field. They picked up the scattered grain and grew into fine, fat pullets. In autumn, the farmer talked of taking the hen hut home, but he was busy with other work. He delayed till winter. In the night before Christmas Eve, there came a fall of snow. When Tappy Tory looked out next morning, the ground was white. She drew back into the hut in consternation. Then Selina Pickercorn and Chucky Doddy looked out. None of them had ever seen snow before. They were April-hatched pullets without a single experienced old hen to advise them. "Is it a tablecloth?" asked Chucky Doddy. They knew all about tablecloths because they had been reared under a hen coop on the drying green. They had been scolded for leaving dirty footmarks on a clean tablecloth which was bleaching upon the grass. The hens slid nervously down the hen ladder onto the snow. "No, it was not a tablecloth," said Tappy Tory. "I'll tell you what, I do believe it is the parrot's Demerara sugar." Now the parrot ought to have told them that Demerara sugar is not white. Selina Pickercorn tasted a beakful. "It is nothing extra special nice. He need not have talked so much about it. How horribly cold and wet it feels." Just then the farmer came into the field with a horse and cart. He drove the hens back into the hut, fastened the door with a peg, and tied the hut behind his cart with a rope in order to drag it homewards through the snow. The hen hut did not run smoothly. It had a tiresome little waggling wheel at one end that caught in ruts. It bumped along, and the pullets inside it cackled and fluttered. Before the procession had got clear of the field, the hut door flew open. Out bounced Tappy Tory, Chucky Doddy, Selina Pickercorn, and 5 other hens. The farmer and his dog caught 5 of them, none too gently, but the 3 first-named birds flew back screaming to the spot where the hen hut had stood originally, before it had been removed. The farmer was obliged to leave them for the present. Tappy Tory, Chucky Doddy, and Selina wandered around in the snow. The field seemed very large and lost under its wide white covering. "The hut is gone," said Tappy Tory with a brainwave. "That is so," agreed Selina Pickercorn. "We fell out of the hut." "What shall we do?" asked Chucky Doddy. "I see nothing for it but a Christmas picnic," said Tappy Tory. "Here is sugar in plenty, but where is the tea and bread and butter?" Large flakes of snow commenced to fall. "Perhaps this is the bread and butter coming," said Tappy Tory, looking up hopefully at the darkening sky. "My feather petticoat is getting so wet," grumbled Chucky Doddy. "Let us try to walk along the top of that wall towards the wood." The wall had a thick white topping of snow. It proved to be a most uncomfortable walk, with frequent tumblings off. They crossed Wilfin Beck on a wooden rail. The water below ran dark and sullen between the white banks. By the time they had reached the wood, it was dusk. For the last 100 yards, the hens had been floundering through snowdrifts. "If this is a Christmas picnic, it is horrid. Let us get up into that spruce tree and roost there till morning." They managed to fly up. They perched in a row on a branch, fluffing out their feathers to warm their cold, wet feet. They were 1 speckled hen and 2 white hens. Only the white hens looked quite yellow against the whiter snow. "The picnic is a long time commencing," said the speckled hen, Tappy Tory. It was soon black as pitch amongst the spreading branches of the spruce. Down below in the glen, the waters of the stream tinkled through the ground ice. Now and then there was a soft rushing sound as the wet snow slipped off the sapling trees that bent beneath its weight and sprang upwards again, released. Far off in the woods, a branch snapped under its load, like the sound of a gun at night. The stream murmured, flowing darkly. Dead keshes, withered grass, and canes stood up through the snow on its banks under a fringe of hazel bushes. Between the stream and the tree where the hens were roosting, there was a white, untrodden slope. Only 1 tree grew there, a very small spruce, a little Christmas tree some 4 foot high. As the night grew darker, the branches of this little tree became all tipped with light and wreathed with icicles and chains of frost. Brighter and brighter it shone until it seemed to bear 100 fairy lights. Not like the yellow gleam of candles, but a clear white incandescent light. Small voices and music began to mingle with the sound of the water. Up by the snowy banks, from the wood and from the meadow beyond, tripped scores of little shadowy creatures, advancing from the darkness into the light. They trod a circle on the snow around the Christmas tree, dancing gaily hand in hand. Rabbits, moles, squirrels, and wood mice, even the half-blind mole, old Samson Velvet, danced hand in paw with a wood mouse and a shrew, whilst a hedgehog played the bagpipes beneath the fairy spruce. Tappy Turi and her sisters craned forward on their branch. "Is the Christmas picnic commencing? May we fly down and share it? Shall we too join the dance?" They slid and sidled forward, shaking down a shower of melting snow and ice. "Cluck, cluck!" cackled the hens as they clutched and fluttered amongst slippery boughs. The lights on the Christmas tree quivered and went out. All was darkness and silence. "I'm afraid the Christmas picnic was only a dream. We shall have to roost here till morning." "Hush, sit still," said Tappy Turi. "It was not us that frightened them away. Something is stirring near the stream. What is it?" The moon shone out between the clouds, throwing long shadows on the snow, shadows of the hazels and tall keshes. A little figure, questing and snuffling, came out into the moonlight, a small brown figure in a buttoned-up long coat. He examined the footsteps on the snow round the Christmas tree. Then, horrible to relate, he came straight up the snowy slope and stood under the spruce, looking up at the hens. He was a disagreeable, fusky-musky person called John Stoat Ferret. At this point, Charles thought it necessary to apologize to Jenny Ferret, who was knitting on the caravan steps. She accepted the apology in good part and said, of course she was not answerable for disagreeable relations. A horrid, fusky, musky, smelly relation with short legs and rather a bushy tail. First he tried to climb the tree, but he could not do so. Then he cried, "Shoo! Shoo!" and threw sticks at the hens. And then he butted against the tree and tried to shake them down. They clung, cackling and terrified, in the boughs high overhead. Then John Stoat Ferret thought of another plan. He determined to make them dizzy. He set to work. He danced. It was not at all nice dancing. At first he circled slowly, very, very slowly, then gradually faster, 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 until he was spinning like a top. And always a nasty, fusky, musky smell steamed upwards into the tree. Tappy Turi, Chucky Doddy, and Selina Pickercorn overhead watched him. They had left off clucking. They watched him in fascinated, terrified silence, craning over their branch. And still he spun round and round and round, and the fusky smell rose up into the spruce. Tappy Turi twisted her head round, following his movements as he danced. And Chucky Doddy twisted her neck round. And Selina Pickercorn not only twisted her head, she began to turn round herself upon the branch. All the hens were growing giddy. John Stoat Ferret danced and spun more furiously. The fusky, musky smell rose higher. All three hens commenced to turn round dizzily. In another minute they would fall off. John Stoat Ferret capered and twirled, but all of a sudden he stopped. He sat up, motionless, listening. Voices were approaching up the cart road that skirts the wood. Upon Christmas Eve, it is a pleasant custom amongst the big folk for carol singers to go singing from farm to farm, even to the lonely cottages on the outskirts of the great woods. Two small boys who had been out with the carolers were going home to supper. Their Christmas picnic had been more prosperous than poor Tappy Turi's. Their pockets were full of apples and toffee and pennies. "George," said Jimmy, "give us a ginger snap." "Nuh-uh," said George. "It will gummy your teeth together that you cannot sing." "Whoop," shouted George, jumping into a snowdrift. "Sing another. Wassail, wassail to our town. The bowl is white, and the ale is brown. The bowl is made of the rosemary tree, and so is the ale of the good barley. Little maid, turl the pin. Open the door and let us come in." John Stoat Ferret listened intently. "Whoop," shouted Jimmy, kicking the snow about and swinging his candle lantern. "Sing another one." Here us comes a wassailing under the holly green, here us comes a wandering so merry to be seen. Good luck, good Master Hodgin, and kind mistress also, and all the little childer that round the table go. Your pockets full of money, your cupboards of good cheer, a Merry Christmas, gizzards, and a Happy New Year. Jimmy, exclaimed George suddenly, I smell stoat. Look over the wall with the lantern. John Stoat Ferret departed hurriedly, and as if a spell were broken, Chucky Doddy, Tappy Tory, and Selina found their voices. They cackled loudly up in the tree. Hey, sighty, said George. Them's our 3 hens that father lost out of the hen hut. Fetch 'em down. I's hoard lantern. This wall's gaily slape, giggled Jimmy, balancing himself on the slippery topstones. He reached up into the tree and got hold of Tappy Tory first by the legs. Catch, said he, and flung her out into the snowdrift in the lane. Here's another fat 'un. He threw Chucky Doddy across. Selina flew after them of her own accord. The boys picked the hens out of the snow and trudged homewards, George with a hen tucked under each arm, and Jimmy with 1 hen and the candle lantern. It was an inglorious ending to Tappy Tory's Christmas picnic, but at one time it looked like ending much worse. Very much worse, cluck, cur, cuck, cuck, cluck, said Charles the cock. Sandy looked thoughtful. Was the parrot an elderly bird? Very aged by his own account, if truthful, replied Charles. I wonder whether he was the same parrot who had an adventure with a hawk long ago. The parrot, which I am referring to, belonged to Squire Brown of Cumberland. The squire also had a chestnut cob on which he went out riding, and he employed an old groom gardener named John Geddes. When Squire Brown came downstairs on fine mornings, he called through the open staircase window to John Geddes in the stable yard. He said, I'm riding today, John Geddes. Then he scratched the parrot's head and read the newspaper and had breakfast. Now the parrot was so tame that he was allowed to come out of his cage, and one day he was waddling about on the lawn when, shocking to say, a large hawk swooped down from the sky and seized poor Polly in its claws. The hawk rose into the air over the house and stable yard, and the parrot, looking down for the last time at its home, saw the old groom gardener sweeping with the yard broom. I'm riding today, John Geddes, shouted Polly, whereupon the hawk was so startled that it let go the parrot, who skimmed downwards from the clouds to safety. Cuck, cuck, cluck! I think I've heard that anecdote before, said Charles. Possibly, replied Sandy, bristling up his moustache. Possibly, but Squire Brown's parrot was the first one it happened to. Zarifa intervened hastily in the cause of peace. Was it not, Miss Brown, a very, very old lady who told us the story? It was, said Sandy, eyeing Charles the cock. And did she not tell us other pretty stories? Continued Zarifa. The story of the fairy clogs, and that pretty tale about the water lilies, how they went adrift and sailed away along the lake and down the river. In each water lily flower was a fairy sitting, with golden curls in the white lily flowers, and a fairy in green, on each broad round leaf, rowing with oars made of rushes. What was the end of that story, Zarifa? Asked Tuppeny. Unfortunately, I do not remember. I don't think it had any end, or else I fell asleep. Chapter 15. Whilst Sandy and the poultry were entertaining each other in the orchard, Pony Billy, saddled and bridled, trotted away in search of the truant paddy pig. He passed in front of the farmhouse windows. Clink, clink, went his shoes on the cobblestones in the yard. Mrs. Hodgson, darning stockings in the sunny window seat, looked up and listened. Nothing could she see. She threaded her needle in and out and in, through the stocking foot. Pony Billy passed by the sweet-smelling wallflowers in the old-fashioned garden, where beehives all a row stood on a deep stone shelf of the wall that faced the sun. The bees were stirring busily after their drowsy winter's sleep. He came along a cart track and through a gate onto the public road. Little sunshiny, whirly winds had powdered white dust upon the kingcups under the hedge, belated March dust in April. The cows looked over the hedge at Pony Billy. Said White Stockings to Fancy, There goes a brave little saddle pony. Look how proudly he arches his neck and tosses his cunning head. See the brass lockets glittering in the sun, and the stirrup irons and the saddle leather. Look at his long, flowing tail, and how gaily he picks his steps. He lifts his feet as prettily as Merrylegs or Cricket, who won the prize at Helsington. Where is he trotting to, think you? Said Buttercup Cow to Nancy. Pony Billy trotted along. It was dinner time with the big folk. He met nobody except old Quaker Goodman, jogging leisurely homeward in a low two-wheeled tub. The fat Quaker pony could see Pony Billy in spite of Fernseed. It swerved across the road to leave him room to pass. Old Mr. Goodman laid his whip very gently along the ribs of the fat pony, as it were patting her with the handle of the whip. "What, Daisy? Why, Daisy? What is thee shying at, Daisy?" Staid iron grey, Daisy plodded steadily on. Her thick bobtail swung from side to side. Horses can see things where the big folk can see nothing, nothing but a silly white stone or a stump on the roadside bank. But horses can see, so likewise can little young children. Two toddling youngsters at play in the dust caught a fleeting glimpse of the fairy pony. They prattled baby talk and clapped their dirty, chubby hands. Pony Billy breasted the hill at a canter. He slackened his pace to a walk as he came along over the croft. He pricked his ears and looked down at the village. The big folk were all indoors at dinner. Margaret, the Coddlin Croft mare, dozed under the penthouse at the smithy. Farmer Hodgson was gossiping at the inn, whilst he waited for the blacksmith. Pony Billy came down the croft at a quick, high-stepping trot. His brass lockets shone in the sun, his bright eyes sparkled. He hailed the smithy with eager neighings. "Hinny-ho, Metal, bellows and shoes, Metal, hinny-ho!" Out came Metal, barking, a hard-haired yellow terrier wearing a little leather apron. "Good day to you, Pony Billy. So the caravan is round again? What can I do for you this time? Another hoop? Another new circus trick?" "I wish to have my shoes removed and put on backwards." "Certainly, 4 removes. We will soon have them off," said Metal. "It does not sound very comfortable, but just as you please. I will blow up the fire. C-R-E-A-K, puff." Metal leaned upon the handle of the bellows. K-R-E-I-K, puff, puff. "They will require a little fitting." Metal turned the shoe upon the hearth amongst the small, hot coal. Puff, puff. "I will take it out in tickets and treat our smithy cat to an outing." Puff, puff. "I owe her one. I pulled her tail. She did scratch me." Puff, puff. "Why did I do it?" C-R-E-I-K, puff, puff. "I did it because she was black. I thought she was a stray black cat. She went up the chimney tortoiseshell and white, and she came down black. Cheesebox, our smithy cat." Farmer Hodgson's mare yawned dismally. "I am sorry, Margaret. I cannot offer to fit your shoes. Your feet are so large I could not lift them." The mare laid her ears back. "No offense to a lady. My master says he likes a horse with a big open foot." Metal took the white-hot horseshoe from the hearth with a little pair of tongs and hammered it daintily on the anvil. "Now your shoes are little fairy shoes, Pony Billy." "Tick, tock, tap, tock," hammered Metal merrily and sang, "Shoe the horse and shoe the mare, but let the little colt go bare. Now lift up your foot till I fit it. Have you ever gone short of fern seed since that night in the snow, Pony Billy?" "Never," said Pony Billy, shaking his mane to feel the precious packet nestling against his neck. "Tap, tap, tap," hammered Metal. "Here a nail and there a trod. Now the horse is well shod. Yes, Cheesebox and I will be coming to the circus this evening." Then Margaret pricked her ears and whinnied at sound of hobnailed boots. Her master and the blacksmith came into the penthouse together. Just then Pony Billy came out. Farmer Hodgson did feel as though he had bumped against something soft, but there was nothing to be seen. It might have been the doorpost. Pony Billy walked up a stony lane, picking his footsteps carefully. It is not agreeable to trot amongst stones with 4 newly shod back-to-front shoes. He stepped in the softest places, by banks and hollows and turnings, by muddy places and dry, always leaving back-to-front horseshoe marks behind him, as though he had come down the lane instead of having gone up. He turned into another lane, crossed a shallow ford, came roundabout behind the wood, and looked over a tumble-down wall. Pringle Wood lay before him, silent still, crowned with golden green in a pale spring afternoon. Almost silent, almost still, save for a whispering breath amongst the golden green leaves and a faint tingle-ringle from the bluebells on the fairy hill of oaks. How blue the bluebells were! A sea of soft, pale blue, tree behind tree, and beneath the trees, wave upon wave, a blue sea of bluebells. Below the low stone wall between it and the wooded hill was a tangly, boggy dell matted with brambles and wild raspberry canes and last year's withered meadow sweet and keshes. Young larch trees and spruces struggled through the briars. A little stream slid gently round the hill beneath ellas and hazel bushes. Pony Billy came over a gap in the wall and pushed his way through the tangle, leaving back-to-front footsteps as he squelched through the black earth and moss. Briars tugged his mane. Raspberry canes pulled his tail as though they were fingers. He left tufts of his shaggy coat upon the brambles. He whinnied, "Hinny-ho! Where are you hiding, Paddy Pig?" No one answered. Only there seemed to be a faint tingle-ringle of laughing from the thousands of bluebells in the wood. Pony Billy got out of the bog with a jump and a scramble up the steep, grassy slope of the hill. Round and round and round he went underneath the oaks, always going widdershins, contrary to the sun, always leaving back-to-front misleading marks behind him. 6 times round he went, and he saw nothing but the bluebells and the oaks. But the 7th time round he saw a little Jenny Wren chittering and fussing round an old hollow tree. "What are you scolding, you little Jenny Wren?" She did not stay to answer. She darted through the wood, twittering gaily. "I had better go and look inside that hollow tree myself," thought Pony Billy. He walked up to it and looked in. "Ho, ho, what are you doing in there, Paddy Pig? Come out." "Never no more," replied Paddy Pig. He was sitting huddled up inside the tree with his foretrotters pressed against his tummy. "Never again, I cannot break through the ropes." "Ropes? Don't be silly. There is nothing but cobwebs." What, no ropes?" "Come out at once," said Pony William, stamping. "I am ill," replied Paddy Pig. He pressed his trotters on his waistcoat. "What have you been eating?" "Tartlets. Tartlets in Pringle Wood. More likely to be toadstools. Come out, you pig, you're keeping the circus waiting." "Never no more shall I return to the go-kart and the caravan." Pony Billy thrust his head through the spider webs in the opening, seized Paddy Pig's coat collar with his teeth, and jerked him out of the tree. What, no ropes? But it is all in vain. He sat upon the grass and wept. "Try a potato? I brought you some on purpose." What, potatoes? But is it safe to eat them?" "Certainly it is," said Pony Billy. "They did not grow in Pringle Wood. Eat them while I have my nose bag. Then I will carry you home again, piggerback." "We will be chased, and I will fall off." He ate all the potatoes. "I feel a little better, but I know I will fall off. Oh, something is pinching my ears." Whatever might be the matter, Paddy Pig's behavior was odd. He got up on a tree stump and he tried to climb into the saddle. First he climbed too far and tumbled over the other side. Then he climbed too short and tumbled. Then he fell over the pony's head. Then he slipped backwards over the crupper, just as though someone were pulling him. He sat upon the ground and sobbed, "Leave me to my fate. Go away and tell my friends that I am a prisoner for life in Pringle Wood." "Try once more. Sit straight and hold on to the strap of lockets," said Pony Billy, trampling through the bluebells. He came out from under the trees into the sunshine. He trotted across the green grass of the open meadow and carried Paddy Pig safely back to camp. Chapter 16. It was 4 o'clock of the afternoon when Pony Billy trotted into Coddlin Croft orchard with Paddy Pig. Sandy and the farm dogs barked joyfully, the turkey cock gobbled, Charles crowed, and Jenny Ferret waved a dishcloth on the caravan steps. Even Tuppeny and Zarifa, dolefully confined in hampers, clapped their little paws in welcome. Paddy Pig took no notice of these greetings. He slid from the saddle and sat by the campfire in a heap. "He looks poorly," said Sandy anxiously. "Fetch a shawl, Jenny Ferret." "Ill, very ill," said Paddy Pig. They wrapped him in the shawl and gave him tea. He was thirsty, but he had no appetite. The raw potatoes appeared to have disagreed on top of the tartlets. As evening closed in, he shivered more and more. The company plied him with questions. How did he get across the water into Pringle Wood? Over a plank. "I don't remember any plank bridge," said Pony Billy. "Perhaps it might be a tree that had been washed down by the flood." "Why did you not come back the same way?" "It was gone," said Paddy Pig, swaying himself about. "What did you do in the wood?" "I tumbled down. Things pulled my tail and pinched me and peeped at me round trees," said Paddy Pig, shuddering. "What sort of things?" "Green things with red noses. Oh, oh, oh," he squealed. "There is a red nose looking at me out of the teapot. Take me away, Pony Billy. I'm going to be sick." "He is very unwell," said Jenny Ferret. "He should be put to bed at once." "But where?" In an ordinary way, Paddy Pig and Sandy slept in dry straw underneath the caravan, but everybody knows that it is unsafe to allow a delirious pig to sleep on the cold ground. "Do you think we could squeeze him through the door into the caravan if I pulled and you pushed?" said Sandy. Jenny Ferret shook her head. "He is too big. We might have crammed him into the go-kart, but it is not here. It was left behind by the Ford." "He must sleep indoors somehow," said Sandy. "Why all this discussion?" said Charles the Cock. "Let our honoured visitor, Mr. Patrick Pig, sleep in the middle stall of the stable. It is empty. Margaret, our mare, stands in the stall next to the window. And there is hay, as well as straw. I, myself, scratched it out of the hay rack. Cock-a-doodle-doo! And there is even a horse rug, a large buff, moth-eaten blanket bound with red braid," said Charles, swelling with importance. "The very thing, provided Margaret has no objection," said Sandy. "Come, Paddy Pig." The invalid rose stiffly to his feet, but he flopped down again nearly into the fire, which would have caused another red nose for certain had he fallen into it. It was necessary to borrow a wheelbarrow, also the stable lantern, as by this time it was dark. Fortunately, Farmer Hodgson had bedded up the mare and fed all for the night. He was having his own supper, quite unconscious that his stable had been requisitioned as a hospital for sick pigs. He supped in the kitchen, and the windows looked another way. Mrs. Hodgson had occasion to go to the pantry for cheese and a pasty. She glanced through the small diamond panes towards the orchard, and the warm glow that was Jenny Ferret's stick fire. "'Tis a red rising moon, will it freeze?" "Bad for the lambs if so be," said Farmer Hodgson, cutting the apple pasty. Paddy Pig did not improve, he became worse. His mind wandered. He talked continually about red noses, and he thought that there were green caterpillars in the manger. He was so obsessed with red-nosed peepers that he would have bolted out of the stable if his legs had been strong enough. "Someone must sit up with him," said Jenny Ferret. "I am no use. I'm only an old body, and you, Sandy, ought to remain on guard at the camp. What is to be done?" "I should esteem it a privilege to be permitted to act as nurse. I am accustomed to night watching," said Cheesebox, the smithy cat. She had arrived with metal, hoping for a circus show, but the company was so anxious about Paddy Pig that they felt unable to give any performance. "I should esteem it a privilege to sit up with Mr. Patrick Pig. At the same time, I should prefer to have a colleague to share the responsibility. Send for Mrs. Scales, Mary Ellen. She has an invaluable prescription for sick pigs, and she understands worm in tail," said Cheesebox. "Had it been the time of the moon, we would have hung up rowan berries in the stall. But failing that propitious season, she has medicinal herbs of great virtue. Send for Mary Ellen." Sandy looked doubtful. "I presume she is another cat? I'm afraid she might refuse to come with me if I went to fetch her. Could you go, Pony Billy? Are you too tired?" Pony Billy sighed the sigh of a weary horse. "Not tired, not at all, but my shoes are past bearing, and here is metal out for a lark. Otherwise, I would have gone to the smithy and had them altered. In any case, I was intending to fetch the tilt cart." Go for the cart before your shoes are changed, Billy. You left it over near to Pringle Wood. I will undertake to have the hearth hot long before you will reach the smithy. Pony Billy paced across the meadow in the starlight. The hill of oaks rose dark and black against the sky. On the ground beneath the trees a few lights were twinkling. Whether they were glowworms or red noses is uncertain, as Pony Billy did not go to look. On the outskirts of the wood, under an elder bush, he found the little cart where he had left it. He placed himself between the shafts and pulled. Once, twice, again. What a weight! Yet the baggage had all been lifted out, as well as Zariffa and Tuppeny. Pony Billy tugged and pulled till he moved it with a sudden plunge that took both the cart and himself over the bank into running water. Thousands of oak apples washed out of the cart kist and changed into sparkling bubbles. They floated away down Wilfin Beck, dancing and glittering in the starlight. He crossed the ford and made his way to the smithy without any further adventure. Chapter 17. The smithy was all aglow with a roaring fire on the hearth. Sparks were flying. Hot firelight flickered on the rafters overhead. It shone upon a crowd of dogs and horses, and upon the gypsy's donkey, Cuddy Simpson, who was dozing in a corner. His head drooped. He rested a strained fetlock wearily. Dogs barked. Horses stamped. There was even the merry feedle-tweedle of a fiddle, to which the collies, Meg and Fly and Glen, warbled a treble chorus. And through all the din sounded the tap, tap, tap of Metal's little hammer on the anvil, and the creaking of the bellows that another dog was blowing. The dog was Eddie Tinker, the gypsy lurcher, and the handhold of the bellows was made of a polished ox horn. "Welcome, Pony Billy, but wait for Cuddy Simpson. He has cast a foreshoe and he is lame and weary. Wait till I fit him with fairy shoes that will make him as lish as new legs. That's why the donkeys never die. They know the road to the fairy smithy." "I can wait," said Pony Billy, who was fond of Cuddy Simpson. "Creak, creak," went the bellows, keeping time to the tune of Black Nag. Louder still barked the dogs, and the horses stamped on the floor. They talked of the good old days, when roads were made for horses. None of this tarry asphalt like a level river of glass. None of this treacherous granite where we toil and slip and stumble, dragged backward by our loads. None of these hooting lorries that force us against the wall. Shrieking, oily, smelly monsters, and everybody has one. The butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, even the fisherman and the farmer. Where are the patient horses? Where is butcher's Ginger and fish cart Fanny and baker's Tommy? Where is the hog-maned mare with the shrapnel marks? Gone, gone, all gone to Oxo. I, Queenie Cross, I, poor old mare, am the last nag left in a huckster's cart. But happen you like the metal, you that work amongst iron and nails and bolts?" "I like them," snarled Metal, banging the hammer on the anvil. "I like those snorting juggernauts. I hate them as much as you do, old queen. They run over us dogs. They lame our cattle. They kill our sheep." Ragman and Roy growled low. "Think of the noble horses in the grand old days of the road. Who needed a starting handle? Who required to wind up a thoroughbred? Breed! Give me breed!" barked Metal. "Will Tom's team in the Coniston coach for me. Now it's rattle, rumble, rattle, rattle, shriek, shriek, shriek. Gone are the pleasant jog-trot days of peace. They have ruined the smithies and stolen the roads. Shame upon the big folks," said Metal, banging on the anvil. "Even Mistress Helis, her that was so fond of ponies, serve her right to lose her clog." "Where did she lose it, Metal?" "Nay, that is a mystery. It seemed to have clog danced right away and back. It came home by Hawkshead, and it had been to Graithwaite. As to the how—" Here Metal interrupted his story to throw a shovelful of small coal onto the hearth. "As to the how she came to lose it, it was this-a-way. She had been on a long, long journey in one of these here rattle-traps, and when she got home and unpacked her luggage, she left her clogs upon the shelf." "What shelf was that, Metal?" "What the big folk that ride in motors call a footboard, quite appropriate for clogs. When the car went forth next morning, there sat the pair of clogs still upon the footboard. They looked proud." "One thing surprises me," interrupted White Collie Fan. "Does Mistress Helis really ever take her clogs off?" I thought she went to bed in them. They were off that day, sure, said Metal, leaning on the bellows handle. I saw them pass the smithy. They grinned at me, their buckles winked. But when the car came home in the afternoon, there was only one clog on the footboard sitting by itself. The other one had fallen off. Which foot's clog was it, Metal? Her best foot that she puts foremost. She was sad. She inquired all over for her right foot clog, and she put a notice, lost a clog, in the window of the village shop. The clog came home again after a while. My word, it had seen some fun. Now it happened this way, continued Metal, turning the donkey shoe with the tongs and blowing white flame through the small coal. It happened this way. The car took the bumpy road through the woods by Easebridge. The clogs joggled on the footboard, joggled and giggled and nudged each other with their elbows. Until bump, bump, bump. Over a rise of the road, they came in sight of Joshy Campbell's tin can dinner box and his big green gingham umbrella. Joshy was an old man with a reddish-grey beard who tidied the sides of the roads, always took out with him his tin can dinner box and his great big bunchy umbrella. I never saw him use his umbrella. He carried it always rolled up to keep it out of the rain. All day while Joshy worked, the umbrella sat by the dike, bolt upright and serious, with a long, curved, hooky nose, and snuggled up beside it sat the dumpy tin can dinner box. When the clog saw the umbrella, they bounced up with a shout. Who up? The left foot clog bounced back upon the board and continued to joyride, but the right foot clog bounced right off. It bounced onto the road and ran back to old Joshy Campbell's umbrella. The umbrella made a bow and stepped out of the ditch. The dinner box made a bob. The clog made a gambol, and away down the road they all ran, hoppity-hop, without ever a stop, stoppity-stop, or the slightest consideration for old Joshy Campbell. They ran and they ran and they hopped and they hopped. For a mile or two they ran, and it was night before they stopped. Metal drew the coal over the donkey shoe with a little coal rake and plied the bellows. Where did they hop to and stop at, Metal? They hopped as far as the middle of the great wood. It was darkish, but they could see to follow the woodland track. For a long, long way they followed it, winding amongst the bushes, until at length before them in the distance they saw a pool of light. It was silvery, like moonlight, only it was always streaming upwards, up from the ground, not downwards from the sky above. The shining space was level like the floor of a great pitstead. It shone like a moonlit mere. And on that shining floor were dancers, strange dancers they were, hundreds of filmy, glittering dancers, dancing to silvery music, thousands of tinkling, echoing murmurs from silver twigs and withered leaves, and still from the dance floor a white light streamed, and showed the dancing shoes that danced thereon, alone. They tell me that in France there is a palace, a fairy palace, and in that court, long, mournful, and deserted, there is a hall of lost footsteps, the salle de pas perdu, where ghosts dance at night. But this dance amongst the oak woods was a dance of joyous memories. If no feet were in the footgear, the shoes but danced more lightly. And what shoes were not there? Shoes of fact and fable. Queen amongst the dancers was a tiny glass slipper, footing it, in minuet and stately gavotte. She danced with a cavalier boot, a high boot with brown leather top. Step it, high boot. Step it, little glass slipper. The chimes will call you at midnight. Cinderella's carriage stops the way. Room for the Marquis, the Grand Marquis of Carabas. Make way for Puss in Boots. These two danced one and one, but beside them danced a pair, goody two-shoes little red slippers. How they did jet it, in and out. And round about them danced other shoes dancing in hundreds, broad shoes of slashed cloth, and long-toed shoes with bells that danced the milkmaid's Morris, broad-toed shoes and high-heeled shoes, jack boots and buckled shoes, and shoes of Spanish leather, and pumps and satin sandals that jigged in and out together. And round about them, clump, danced Mistress Healy's clog dancing like a good one, with Joshy Campbell's dinner box and the tall green gingham umbrella. Only those two were different. All the other dancers were shoes, and the main of them were horseshoes, shoes of all the brave horses that ever were shod in the good old days of the road. There were little shoes of Galloways, and light shoes of thoroughbreds, and great shoes of Clydesdales, and the biggest were the wagoners. On they came galloping, ha-halloo, ha-halloo. Brill the foxhound lifted up her voice, ha-halloo, ha-halloo. Galloping, galloping, black nag come galloping, hark to the timber wagons thundering down the drift road, shouted Metal, banging on the anvil. Hark the ringing music of the horseshoes. Here's tap, tap, tappity, trot, trot, trod. Sing Dolly's little shoes on the hard high road. Sing Quaker Daisy's sober pace. Sing high-stepping Peter for stately grace. Phoebe and Blossom sing softly and low, dear dead horses of long ago. Jerry and Snowdrop, Black Jet and Brown, Tom and Cassandra, the pride of the town. Bobby and Billy Gray, Gypsy and Nell, more bonny ponies than I can tell. Prince and Lady, Mabel and Pet, rare old Diamond and Lofty and Bet. Now for the wagoners! Hark to the trampling of the wagoners! Shouted Metal, banging on the anvil. Here's Dick, Duke, Sally, and Captain True, wisest of horses that ever wore shoe, shaking the road from the ditch to the crown when the thundering, lumbering larch comes down. Ah, good old days, brave old horses. Sing louder, good dogs, barked Metal. Sing, Pony Billy, sing up old Queenie, thou last of the nags. Sing the right words, dogs, none of that twaddle. Now sing all together, keep time to the bellows. Do you ken John Peel with his coat so grey? Do you ken John Peel at the break of day? Do you ken John Peel when he's far, far away, with his hounds and his horn in the morning? 'Twas the sound of his horn called me from my bed, and the cry of his hounds has me oft times led. For Peel's view, halloa would waken the dead, or a fox from his lair in the morning. Louder and merrier rose the hunting chorus, floating round the rafters with the eddying smoke from the forge. Till the big folk that slept up above in Anvil Cottage turned on their featherbeds and dreamed that they were fox hunting. Chapter 18. The moon had risen by the time that Pony Billy, properly shod, trotted away from the village smithy to fetch Mary Ellen. The empty tilt cart rattled at his heels, jumping forward into the harness like a live thing downhill. Trundling gaily along the level, the pebbles on the road sparkled in the dazzling moonlight. Pony Billy blew puffs of white breath from his nostrils, and he stepped high. Tap, tap, tappity, prancing to the tune of the smithy song. He amused himself with step dancing over the shadows of the hedgerow trees. Black shadows flung across the silver road from hedge bank to hedge. Down below in the reed beds, a wild duck was quacking. A roe deer barked far off in Gallop Wood. White mist covered the dub. The woods lay twinkling in the moonlight. Uphill and downhill, Pony Billy trotted on, and the woods stretched mile after mile. The tall, straight tree trunks gleamed in white ranks, trees in hundreds of thousands. Pony Billy glanced scarily right and left. Almost he seemed to hear phantom galloping horseshoes as his own shoes pattered on the road. Almost he seemed to see again the fairy dances of Metal's story by the forge. Shadows of a shadow. Was that the shadow of a little hooded figure flitting across a forest ride, and a dark, prowling shadow that followed her? Was the trotting shadow on the road beside him the shadow of himself? Or was it the shadow of another pony? A little bay pony in a pony trap, with an old woman and a bobtailed dog caught in a snowstorm in the woods. But this white road was not white with snow, and they were real overtaking footsteps that caused Pony Billy to spring forward with a start of panic. 3 roe deer cantered by. Their little black hoofs scarcely touched the ground, so lightly they bounded along. They made playful, grunting noises and dared Pony Billy to catch them. He arched his neck and trotted his best while he hinnied in answer to the deer. They bore him merry company for longer than a mile, sometimes gambolling alongside, sometimes cantering on before. On and on they travelled, through many miles of woods, past the black firs, past the sealy bushes in the swamp, past the grove of yew trees on the crags, past the big beech trees, uphill and down. Sometimes a rabbit darted across their path, and once they saw two strange, dwarfy figures crossing the road in front of them, stumpy, waddling figures, broad as they were long, running. The second trundled a hand-barrow, the foremost pulled it with a rope. There go the oakmen. Are those Pissamore hills in the glade? Or are they tiny charcoal settings on the pitsteads? The gambling roe deer kick up their heels. They know the weight of Oakman Huddekin's sledge in winter. But this is spring. The dwarfy, red-capped figures, running like two little fat badgers, disappeared in the moonlight behind the great oak. At length, the woods grew thinner. There began to be moonlit clearings, small parrots where the big folk last summer had hung white streamers on sticks to scare the red stags from the potato drills. The friendly roe deer turned aside and left him, leaping a roadside fence with a flicker of white scuts. Pony Billy by himself reached a lonely farm steading. He was pleasantly warm after his long, brisk trot. He turned up a narrow yard between manure heaps and a high stone building that showed a whitewashed front to the moon. He passed the doors of byres. Sleepy cows mooed softly. Their warm, sweet breath smelled through the door slats. A ringwiddy clinked as a cow turned her head to listen to the wheels. Pony Billy passed several more doors. Old Tiny, the sow, was snoring peacefully behind one of them. He drew the cart round the end of the ship-on into a cobble-paved yard where the wheels rumbled over the stones. He went up to the back door of the house. There was no light upstairs. The window panes twinkled in the moonlight. A faint red glow showed through the kitchen window and under the back door. Mary Ellen, the farm cat, sat within, purring gently and staring at the hot white ashes on the open hearth. Wood ash that burns low but never dies for years. She sat on a dun-coloured deerskin spread on the kitchen flags. Pots and pans, buckets, firewood, koppie stools cumbered the floor, and a great brown cream mug was set to warm before the hearth against the morrow's churning. The half-stone weight belonging to the butter scales was on the board that covered the mug. Mary Ellen had not been sampling the cream. She sat before the hot wood ash and purred. Crickets were chirping. All else was asleep in the silent house. Mary Ellen listened to the sounds of wheels and horseshoes which came right up to the porch. Pony Billy's soft nose snuffled about the latch. He struck a light knock on the door with a forward swing of his forefoot. Mary Ellen arose from the hearth. She went towards the door and looked through a crack between the door and the door jamb. "Good evening, good pony. Good evening to you, sir. I would bid you come in by, only the door is locked. Snecks I can lift, but the key is upstairs." Pony Billy explained his errand through the crack. "Dear, dearie me, poor young pig," purred Mary Ellen, "and me shut up here, accidental like with the cream. Dearie, dearie me now, to think of that. Asleep in the clothes swill I was when the door got locked. Yes, indeed I do understand pig powders and herbs and clisters and cataplasms and nutritions and triopharmacons, etc., purred Mary Ellen. But pray, how am I to be got out without the door key?" Pony Billy pawed the cobblestones with an impatient hoof. "Let me see, good Mr. Pony. Do you think that you could push away that block of wood that is set against a broken pane in the pantry window? Yes? Now I will put on my shawly shawl, so," purred Mary Ellen. "So, I am stout and the hole is small. Dearie, dearie me, what a squeeze. I am afraid of broken glass, but there is nothing like trying," purred Mary Ellen, safely outside upon the pantry windowsill. "Now I can jump down into your cart if you will back, under the windy pindy." "First rate. Are you ready, ma'am?" said Pony Billy, backing against the wall with a bump. "Oh, dearie me! I have clean forgotten the herbs. I must climb in again. Bunches and bunches of herbs," purred Mary Ellen, pausing on the windowsill above the cart. "My Mistress Scales grows a plant of rue on purpose for poor sick piggy-wiggies. Herb of grace, purred Mary Ellen. "What says old Gerard in the big calf-skin book? St. Anthony's fire is quenched therewith. It killeth the shingles. 12 pennyweight of rue is a counter-poison to the poison of wolf's bane, and mushrooms, and toadstools, and the bite of serpents, and the sting of scorpions, and hornets, and bees, and wasps, insomuch that if the weasel is to fight the serpent, she armeth herself by eating rue. Toadstools. It says so in the big book." "The very thing," purred Mary Ellen, squeezing inside and disappearing into the pantry. "Bunches and bunches of herbs," she purred, struggling out again through the broken window. "Bunches and bunches hanging from the kitchen ceiling, and a pot of goose grease on the jamboard, and a gun, and onions, and a lambing crook, and a fishing rod, and a brass meat jack that winds up." "Am I to take all these things, Mum?" inquired Pony Billy. "Bless me, no, only the herbs," purred Mary Ellen, seating herself in the cart. But no sooner had Pony Billy turned it in the yard, preparing to start homewards. "Oh, dearie, dearie me! I forgot my fur-lined boots. No, not through the window this time. I keep my wardrobe in the stick-house, and I would like an armful of brackens in the cart-kist to keep my footsies warm. Please, Mr. Pony Billy." "We shall get away sometime," thought Pony William. Once set off, Mary Ellen sat quietly enough, never moving anything excepting her head, which she turned sharply from side to side at the slightest rustle in the woods, hoping to see rabbits. The roe deer did not show themselves again. The journey back to Coddlin Croft farm was uneventful. Mary Ellen was set down safely at the stable door. Cheesebox welcomed her effusively. After assuring himself that Paddy Pig was still alive and kicking, Pony Billy dragged the tilt cart into the orchard and tipped it up beside the caravan. Himself, he went up to the haystack for a well-earned bite of supper. Afterwards, he lay down on the west side of the stack and slept there, sheltered from the wind. Chapter 19. Mary Ellen was a fat tabby cat with sore eyes and white paws and an unnecessarily purry manner. If people only looked at her, she purred and scrubbed her head against them. She meant well, but she drove Paddy Pig wild. "Was it a leetle sick piggy-wiggy? Was it cold then?" purred Mary Ellen, working her claws into the horse blanket and squirming it upwards. The result was that the top of the blanket got into Paddy Pig's mouth, whilst his hind feet were left bare and cold. "Bless its little petitos! No, it must not kick its blanket off its beddy. What? I'm snuffocated. Sandy, take away this cat. I'm scumfished." "Was it a leetle fidgety-pidgety?" "Sandy, I say, take away this awful cat," screamed Paddy Pig. At that moment, Cheesebox entered the stable carrying a jug of rue tea. "He sounds very fractious. Keep him flat, Mary Ellen." Paddy Pig sat up violently under the blanket. "Bring me a bucketful of pig wash, none of your cat lap." "Rue tea," purred Mary Ellen. "My Mrs. Scales always prescribes nice rue tea in a little china cuppy for poor sick piggy-wiggies with tummy-ackies." Paddy Pig swallowed the rue tea under protest. He was sick immediately in spite of the expostulations of the two cats. Magret, the mare in the next stall, blew her nose and stamped. After he had exhausted himself with kicking and squealing, Paddy Pig sank into uneasy slumber. But every time he turned over, he kicked off the blanket, and there was another cat fight. Towards midnight, he grew quieter. The cats sat up all night, wide awake and watchful. There were noises of rats in the old walls of the stable, and noises of night birds without. Twice during the small hours of the morning, Sandy's black nose appeared under the stable door. He listened to the patient's uneasy breathing, and then returned to his straw bed underneath the caravan. At 2 a.m. the cats made themselves a dish of tea, proper tea, made of tea leaves. It enlivened them to endless purring conversations. They gossiped about other cats of their acquaintance. About our cat Tamzine and her 15th family of kittens, and how Tamzine once was lost for a whole week and came home very thin, and after all, she had been no further off than the next-door house, which was shut up empty, while the tenants had gone away for a week's holiday. But what had Tamzine been doing to get herself locked up in the next-door pantry, I wonder? Perhaps she was catching dear little mousy mousies, purred Mary Ellen. She did not look as though she had eaten many, and to think that her people had heard her mewing and had searched for her high and low, never guessing that the next-door house was locked up empty. And there was Mady, too. Oh, what a sad, sad accident. Caught in a rabbit trap, poor love. She has limped about on only 3 footsies ever since. That comes of rabbiting, said Cheesebox, who was a stay-at-home cat. I used to know a black cat called Smutty who caught moles alive and brought them into the kitchen. What? Will you be quiet, you horrid old cats? I want to go to sleep. A sweet pussy is Tamzine. Whose kitten was she? Resumed Mary Ellen, after renewed struggles with the patient and the blanket. Whose kitten? She was Judy's kitten only, of course. She was not Judy's. Judy had a fat, big kitten of her own in the hayloft, and one day she brought in a much younger young kitten, the smallest that ever was seen. It was so very tiny it could sit inside a glass tumbler. Goodness knows where Judy had picked it up. She carried it into the house and put it down before the fire on the hearthrug. Judy nursed it, and it grew up into Tamzine, but it was not Judy's kitten. She was a fine cat, old Judy, such a splendid ratter. Tamzine is a rubbish. She will not look at a rat, and she plays with mice, which is as silly as trying to educate them. Did you ever hear of Louisa Pussycat's mouse seminary? No? Never. Does she bury the dear little things? I always eat them. I did not say cemetery, I said seminary. Seminary is the genteel word for school. Miss Louisa Pussycat is very genteel. One night I went to town to buy soap and candles, and I thought I might as well call at the Mrs. Pussycat's shop as I was passing. On my way through the square, I saw Louisa coming down the steps from the loft over the stores. She had purchases in a basket, and she was on her way homewards. We passed the time of night and inquired after each other's kittens. Then, as I had hoped, she invited me to step in and drink a cup of tea and inspect the latest spring fashions from Catchester. As we went along the catwalk, she told me how she had commenced to keep a mouse seminary in addition to conducting the millinery business. She said, "It is remarkable how character can be molded in early youth. You would scarcely credit the transformation which I achieve with my mice cheesebox." I inquired. "Do you use porcelain molds or tin, Louisa?" "Character cheesebox. I refer to the amelioration of disposition and character, not to compote of mouse. I mold and educate their minds. I counteract bad habits by admonition, by rewards, and, by judicious weeding out. Recalcitrant pupils whose example might prove deleterious are fried for supper by Matilda. I never have any trouble with dunces or drones. My pupils excel especially in application and in exemplary perseverance. This very night I have left the whole seminary industriously occupied with the task of sorting 2 pounds of rice, which I have inadvertently poured into the moist sugar canister. Think of the time which it would have cost me to retrieve those grains of rice myself. But thanks to my indefatigable mice, I am free to go out shopping, and my sister Matilda is drinking tea with friends, whilst my mouse seminary is sorting rice and sugar under the superintendence of my favourite pupil, Tilly Dumpling. I have also taught my mice to count beans into dozens, and to sift oatmeal into a chestnut. "Dear me, Louisa," said I, getting a word in edgeways, "are their fingers clean enough to handle groceries? I always think one can smell mice in a store cupboard. My mice, cheesebox, always lick their fingers before touching food." "Really? And can you trust them with cheese?" "We have, a china cheese cover, which the mice are unable to raise. But for ordinary household duties, such as tidying and dusting, their assistance is invaluable. And they call me punctually at 8:30, I should say 7:30. I sit up late, trimming bonnets." At this point of the conversation, we turned a corner and came in sight of the milliner's shop, a little steep, 3-storied house with diamond panes in the windows. They call it Thimble Hall. The house was lighted up, not only the shop, but also the parlour, which the Mrs. Pussycats only used on Sundays. "Dear me, Louisa, do you allow your mice to burn candles?" Ahem, no, it is an indiscretion, said Louisa, feeling in her pocket for her latchkey. Even before the key was in the lock, we could hear patterings, squeakings, and shrill laughter. Your pupils seem to be merry, Louisa. It must be that little wretch Tilly Didlam, who eats comfits in school. I will have mouse sausage for supper, said Louisa, opening the house door hurriedly. As we entered the passage, we encountered a smell of toffee, and something boiled over on the parlour fire with a flare-up. There was pitter, pattering, and scurrying into mouse holes, followed by silence. We looked into the parlour. The fire had been lighted upon a weekday, and upon the fire was a frying pan. Toffee, mouse toffee, toffee with lemon in it. I'll toffee you. I will bake the whole seminary in a pasty. When you catch them, Louisa, after all, when the cat's away, the mice will play. I fancy that was the end of the Mrs. Pussycat's mouse seminary. Since then they have been content to manage the bonnet shop. Chapter 20. Paddy Pig continued to be poorly all next day, poorly and very feverish. The circus company were concerned and worried. It added to their anxiety that they should be detained so long at Coddlin Croft farm. The farm animals and poultry were becoming troublesome. Sandy was almost as tired of Charles the cock as Paddy Pig was of Mary Ellen the cat. A change of air might do Paddy Pig good. It strikes me his illness is largely imagination and temper. Listen how he is squealing, said Sandy to Pony Billy. I do not like to take the responsibility of removing him without advice, said the cautious pony. Suppose it should prove to be measles. Sandy had an inspiration. Could we not consult the veterinary retriever? Would he come, think you? You and your friend Eddie Tinker bit him rather shabbily, two of you at once. Perhaps he would come if you asked him, Pony William. If you would ask him nicely, and take my apologies with this large bone. Where did you find that large bone, Alexander? In the ash pit, I assure you, William. It smells. It does, said Pony Billy. I'm tired of trotting on the roads, but I suppose it must be done. The sooner we get away to the moors, the better for all of us. Jenny Ferret says Zarifa has rubbed her nose with gnawing the wires of her cage, and Tuppenny's hair is all tangled again for want of being brushed. But it is not safe to let them out with all these strange dogs and cats, and Charles is not to be trusted for pecking. Look at the poultry crowding round the caravan. Mrs. Hodgson has been calling Chuck, Chuck all the afternoon, but the hens won't go home to lay. And the worst of it is they are all clamouring to see the pygmy elephant. Tell them he has caught a cold in his trunk. That would be too near the truth. They must not guess that Paddy Pig is the elephant. Pony Billy thought for a moment. Say the elephant has gone to Blackpool. Now that's a good idea. And if Charles asks me any more impertinent questions, I'll pull his tail feathers out. Pony Billy looked serious. Such a proceeding would be a poor return for the hospitality of Coddlin Croft. Give them some sort of a show, Sandy, while I am away. Consult Jenny Ferret. So Pony Billy trotted away once more, and Sandy and Jenny Ferret determined to give the best performance that could be arranged under the circumstances. Ikey Shepster flew round with invitations gratis, and there was quite a full house in the orchard. There were ducks, pigs, poultry, turkeys, 2 farm dogs, and the cat, which was a great disappointment for the mice who had counted upon coming. And there were also 4 calves, a cow, a pet lamb, and a number of sparrows. And it would have meant a good bit of corn for us if they had all paid for tickets, said Sandy regretfully, but then the sparrows would not have come, and I have doubts about Charles. He would never have taken tickets for all those hens. Sandy was inspecting the audience through a hole in an old curtain which was hung on the line between 2 clothes props. Behind the curtain was a small platform, in fact, a box wrong side up, and behind the platform were the steps of the caravan. So the stage was conveniently situated in front of the caravan door. Ikey Shepster directed the performance from the roof above. Are you all seated? Pull the curtain, Sandy. Cow, pigs, poultry, and gentlemen, murmurs and chirtlings from Charles. Dogs, cat, poultry, and gentlemen, I beg to explain that a concatenation of unforeseen circumstances has caused this performance to be curtailed gratis. Hear, hear, chirped the sparrows. Because Mr. Pony William isn't here, and Mr. Patrick Pig is unwell, and the pygmy elephant has gone to Blackpool, wherefore cluck, cur, cluck, cuck, cluck. When do you expect him back? Interrupted Charles. Has gone to Blackpool for a month, wherefore the rest of us will present a dramatic sketch in 6 scenes accompanied by recitation. I should also say the live polecats and weasels are poorly, but the fat dormouse of Salisbury will be exhibited in a cage on account of that cat. Likewise the Sultan, cluck, cur, cluck, cluck, cluck. My hens would prefer not to see the polecats. You ain't gonna see them. Act 1, Scene 1, said Ikey Shepster. The door of the caravan opened and Jenny Ferret came down the steps onto the stage. She did always dress like an old woman, but this time she was dressed more so. She wore a white-frilled much cap and spectacles. She carried a plate and was followed by Sandy. Ikey Shepster up above recited, Old Mother Hubbard, she went to the cupboard to get her poor doggy a bone. When she got there, the cupboard was bare, and so the poor doggy had none. Jenny Ferret looked inside an up-ended, perfectly empty biscuit canister, which was the only piece of furniture on the stage. In dumb show, she condoled with Sandy, who was begging pathetically. Then they both bundled up the steps out of sight into the caravan. Cluck, cur, cluck, cluck, cluck. I've heard that before, said Charles. Did not he act it natural? Said one farm dog to the other. Not a single crumb. Fie, what bad housekeeping, cackled the hens. Scene 2, said Ikey Shepster. She went to the barber's to buy him a wig. When she came back, he was dancing a jig. For this scene, Sandy came on first by himself. He danced a lively pas seul, spinning round and pirouetting. Jenny Ferret came out on the steps with a wisp of grey horsehair in her hand to represent the wig. She stood in an attitude of admiration watching Sandy. Then she retired into the caravan, and after a few more twirls, Sandy fell flop upon the stage with all his legs in the air. What's the matter with him? Is he ill? Asked the ducks. Cuck, cur, cluck, began Charles. Scene 3, said Ikey Shepster hastily. She went to the baker's to buy him some bread. When she came back, the poor dog was dead. Jenny Ferret wrung her hands over the prostrate Sandy. The cow appeared deeply shocked. Scene 4, said Ikey Shepster, after Jenny Ferret had gone back into the caravan, carrying the unwanted loaf wrapped in newspaper. She went to the joiner's to buy him a coffin. When she came back, the poor dog was laughing. Cuck, cur, cluck. I've heard the whole of this before, said Charles. She went to the butcher's to buy him some tripe. When she came back, he was smoking a pipe. Cuck, cur, cluck. That I have certainly heard, said Charles. Sandy was becoming so angry that he could scarcely hold the pipe in his mouth or restrain himself from jumping off the stage at Charles. Scene 6, said Ikey Shepster severely to the audience, who, however, were all listening with respectful attention, excepting Charles. Scene 6, which none of you can have heard before, because I only invented it this minute. Play up, Sandy. She went to the grocer's to buy him some cheese. When she came back, the poor dog did sneeze. Sandy relieved his indignation by letting off a terrific kitty shoo. Scene 7 and last, said Ikey Shepster. The dame made a curtsy, the dog made a bow, and the dame said, Your servant. The dog said, Bow wow. Cluck, 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 very good, said Charles the cock, while the birds clapped their wings and the dogs barked applause. Now, Charles, get on the platform yourself and give us something. Certainly with pleasure, said Charles. Up he flew and commenced. This is the cock that crowed in the morn, that waked the priest all shaven and shorn, that married the man all tattered and torn, that kissed the maiden all forlorn, that milked the cow with the crumpled horn, that tossed the dog that worried the cat, that killed the rat that ate the malt, that lay in the house that Jack built. Well done, Charles. A tale that was told in the city of of the Chaldees, and none the less interesting, although we have heard it before. The entertainment concluded with a few conjuring tricks performed by Ike Shepster, who was an adept at causing things to disappear. Zarifa's scissors were still missing, and the teaspoons were a short count. Jenny Ferret was indignant. She reproached the bird continually. "If you scold me any more, I shall fly away without giving notice," said Ike Shepster sulkily. "That is a loss we could put up with," grumbled Jenny Ferret. "It is my belief you are feathering your nest with teaspoons. And what for are you picking off red currant blossoms? You and that hen starling? Is it a wedding?" Ike Shepster laughed and chittered and flew to the top of the chimney stack. He fluttered his wings and whistled to the setting sun, and to a very pretty speckled starling perched on the next chimney pot. The ducks waddled home from the orchard. The hens became tired of waiting for the pygmy elephant and came home to roost. The camp was left in peace. There were white violets under the orchard hedge. They smelled very sweet in the evening. "Jenny Ferret, please let me out. I want to brush Tuppony's hair. I want to come out." "Jenny Ferret," said Zarifa, scrubbing her nose between the wires of her cage and tugging at the bars with little pink hands. "I cannot let you come out, Zarifa. The farm cat is sitting on the pigsty roof. It sits there all day long watching us." "Is that why the mice could not come?" "Yes, it is. The sparrows said so. 4 mice had come from Hilltop Farm on purpose to see the circus, and 5 others came from Buckle Yate and the Courier. They are in the granary now, hiding behind a corn bin." Zarifa gnawed the bars with vexation. "I did want to see those hilltop mice again, Jenny Ferret. Cobweb and Dusty, and Pippin and Smut. Is there no way of asking them to tea?" "You would not like the cat to catch them, Zarifa." A tear trickled down Zarifa's nose. Jenny Ferret was a good-natured old thing. She said Zarifa and Tuppeny deserved a treat, that they did, and Sandy agreed with her. So he consulted Tappy Turi, the speckled hen. Tappy Turi talked to the sparrows who roost in the ivy on the walls of the big barn, and the sparrows twittered through the granary window and talked to the mice behind the corn bin. They told the mice that it would be quite safe, on Sandy's word of honor, to tie themselves up in a meal bag, which Sandy would carry to the caravan. In the meantime, Jenny Ferret had made preparations for a mouse party, cake, tea, bread and butter, and jam and raisins for a tea party, and comfits and currants, lemonade, biscuits, and toasted cheese for a dance supper party to follow. She brewed the tea beforehand because the teapot would be too heavy for the dormouse, so she covered it up with a tea cozy. Then she unfastened Zarifa's cage and Tuppony's hamper and the string of the meal bag, bolted the windows of the caravan, and came out. She locked the door on the outside and gave the key to Sandy. Sandy had business elsewhere, and Jenny Ferret was quite content to spend the night curled up in a rug on top of the caravan steps, listening to the merriment within, and a merry night it was. One of the mice had brought a little fiddle with him, and another had a penny whistle, and all of them were singers and dancers. They came tumbling out of the bag in a crowd, all dusty white with meal. No wonder Sandy had found the sack rather heavy. There were 4 visitor mice from Hilltop Farm, and 5 from Buckle Yate and the Courier, and there were no less than 9 from Coddlin Croft. While they tidied and dusted themselves, Zarifa brushed Tuppony's hair. When they were all snod and sleek, she peeped under the tea cozy. "The tea is brewed. We will lift the lid and ladle it out. I will use my best doll's tea service. Please, Pippin and Dusty, sing us a catch while Tuppeny and I set the table. First we will have songs and tea, and then a dance and a supper, and then more singing and dancing, and you won't go home till morning." Pippin clapped his little paws. "Oh, what fun! How good of old Jenny Ferret to cheat the pigsty cat!" And he and Dusty sang with shrill treble voices. "Dingle, dingle, dowsy, ding, dong, dell. Doggy's gone to Hawkshead, gone to buy a bell. Tingle, ringle, ringle, ding, dong, bell. Laugh, little mousy, pussy's in the well." Then Cobweb sang, "Who put her, little Tommy Thin?" And Pippin repeated, "Who put her in? Who pulled her out?" "Who put her in?" chimed in Dusty. "Who pulled her out? Little Tommy Stout," sang Smut. "Who pulled her out?" Then all the mice sang together, "What a naughty boy was that, for to drown our pussy-cat, who never did him any harm, and caught all the mice in Grandad's big barn." "But Pussy did not catch quite all of us," laughed Pippin. He started another glee. "Dickory, dickory, dock, the mouse ran up the clock." Each mouse took up the song a bar behind the last singer. Dickory, dickory, dock. The clock struck 1. The mouse ran up the clock. Down the mouse run. The clock struck 1. Down the mouse run. Dickory, dickory, dock. There was singing and laughing and dancing still going on in the caravan when Sandy came back in the morning. Chapter 21. Now, while the mice were merrymaking in the caravan, all sorts of things were happening in the stable. Paddy Pig continued to be feverish and restless. He kicked off the blanket as fast as the cats replaced it. "His strength is well maintained," said Cheesebox after a renewed struggle. "We must keep him on a low diet." What? I'm hungry," squealed the patient. "Fetch me a bucketful of pigwash, I say. I'm hungry." Possibly he might be granted a teeny-weeny bit of fish. "The fisher cart comes round from Flukeborough on Wednesdays," purred Mary Ellen. "I won't eat it. Flukes are full of pricky bones. Fetch me pigwash and potatoes." "I could pick it for you if you fancied a little fish." "I don't want fish, I tell you. I want potatoes," grumbled Paddy Pig. He closed his eyes and pretended to snore. "He sleeps," purred Mary Ellen. "Which of us shall sit up first?" "We might as well take turns," said Cheesebox, who was growing a trifle tired of Mary Ellen's purring. "I will watch first, dear Cheesebox, while you take 40 winky peepees." Mary Ellen composed herself beside Paddy Pig with her paws tucked under her. Paddy Pig sulked. Magret, the mare, dozed in the stall nearest to the window. There was some reflected moonlight through the small, dusty panes, but the stable was very dark. Cheesebox jumped nimbly onto the manger, and thence into the hay-rack, wherein was some foisty hay, long undisturbed, to judge by 3 doubtful eggs in a forgotten hen-nest. Cheesebox curled herself up in the hay. Overhead cobwebs hung from the broken plaster of the ceiling. There were cracks between the laths and holes in the floor of the loft above. The stable had been well appointed in old days. The tailposts of the stalls were handsomely carved, and on each were nailed the antlers of deer. The points served as pegs for hanging up the harness. But all had become neglected, broken, and dark. The corn bin was patched with tin, and the third backmost stall was full of lumber. A slight noise amongst the lumber drew the attention of Cheesebox, a climbing, scratching noise, followed by the pattering of rats' feet over the loft above. Mary Ellen, in the stall below, stopped purring. Cheesebox listened intently. There were many pattering footsteps. More and more rats were assembling. "There must be a committee meeting, a congress of rats," thought Cheesebox, very wide awake. The noise and squeaking increased until there was a sound of rapping on a box for silence. "I move that the soapbox chair be taken by Alder-Rat Squeaker," seconded and carried unanimously. "First business," said Old Chair Squeaker in a rich, sweaty voice. "First business, please." But there seemed to be neither first nor last. All the rats squeaked at once, and the chair rat thumped in vain upon the soapbox. "One at a time, please. You squeak first. No, not you. Now be quiet, you other rats. I call upon Brother Chigbacon to address the assembly. Now, Brother Chigbacon, squeak up." "Mr. Chair Rat and Brother Ratmen, I rise from a sense of cheese, I should say duty, so to squeak. I represent the stable rats, so to squeak, what is left of us, so to squeak, being only me and Brother Scattermeal. Mr. Chair Rat, we being decimated. A horrid, squinting, hideous old cat named Cheesebox." Mary Ellen looked up at the hay-rack and grinned from ear to ear. Cheesebox's tail twitched. "A mangy, skinny-tailed, scraggy, dirty old grimalkin is decimating us. What is to be done, Mr. Chair Rat and Brother Ratmen? We refer ourselves to the guidance of your united wisdom and cunning." The loud, noisy squeaking recommenced. All the rats squeaked different advice, and old chair squeaker thumped upon the soapbox. At length, amongst the jumble of squeaks, a resolution was put before the meeting by Ratson Naylor, a pert young rat from the village shop. He proposed that a bell be stolen and hung by a ribbon round the neck of that wicked green-eyed monster, the ugliest, greediest, slyest cat in the whole village. But with a bell round her neck we would always hear her coming, in spite of her velvet slippers. Every rat voted for this proposal except old chair squeaker. He was a rat of many winters, renowned for extracting cheese from every known make of rat trap without setting off the spring. "Why don't you vote? What's your objection, old chair squeaker?" inquired Ratson Naylor pertly. "No objection," replied old chair squeaker. "None whatever. But tell me, who is going to bell the cat?" No one answered. Cheesebox reached up, standing on her hind legs in the hayrack. She applied her green eyes to a crack between the boards of the loft floor. Instantly there was a rush, a scurry, and the assembly of rats dispersed. Cheesebox jumped down into the stall. Her tail was thick, her fur stood on end. Mary Ellen, very unwisely, was still shaking with laughter. Cheesebox walked up to Mary Ellen. She boxed Mary Ellen's ears with her claws out. Mary Ellen, with a howl, jumped into the hayrack. Cheesebox followed her. They sat in the hay, making horrible cat noises and cuffing each other to the intense annoyance of the mare in the stall below. As for Paddy Pig, who had really been enjoying a good sleep at last, Paddy Pig screamed with rage and yelled for Sandy. While the uproar was at its height, the stable door opened and Sandy came in carrying a lantern and followed by the veterinary retriever and Pony Billy. The retriever was a large, important dog with a hurrying, professional manner, copied from his master. He came rapidly into the stall, wearing a long blue overcoat, and examined the patient through a pair of large horn spectacles. The cats glared down at him from the hayrack. "Put your tongue out and say ah." "What? What? It is bad manners," objected Paddy Pig. "Put your tongue out, or I'll bite you." What? The patient does not appear to be amenable to treatment, but I can perceive no rash, nothing which would justify me in diagnosing measles. Dognosing, he pronounced it. I am inclined to diagnose iracundia arising from tormenta ventris, complicated by feline incompatibility. But in order to make certain, I will proceed to feel the patient's pulse. Where is the likeliest spot to find the pulse of a pig, I wonder? "Try feeling his tail," suggested Pony William. "I have no watch," said the retriever, "but the thermometer will do just as well. Hold it to the lantern, Sandy, while I count." "It does not seem to go up," said Sandy, much mystified. "That settles it," said the retriever. "I felt sure I was not justified in dognosing measles. We will now proceed to administer an emetic, I mean to say an aperient. Has anybody got a medicine glass?" "There is a drenching horn in that little wall cupboard behind the door," said Margaret, who was watching the proceedings with, poor Paddy Pig, much interest over the side of her stall. "Capital," said the retriever. "Hold the bottle, please, Sandy, while I dust the horn. It's chock full of cobwebs." Sandy shook the bottle. "I partly seem to know the smell," said he. He held it beside the lantern and spelled out the label. "Apadildoc, what may that be?" The retriever displayed some anxiety to get the bottle away from him. "Be careful, the remedy is extremely powerful." "Excuse me," purred a cat's voice from the hayrack overhead. "Excuse me. Apadildoc is not for insides. My poor dear Granny Ma, Puss Cat Mew, had Apadildoc rubbed on her back where she got burnt by a hot cinder while she was sitting in the fender. Apadildoc is poison." "In spite of our differing, I agree with you," said another cat's voice in the hayrack. "Apadildoc is for outward application only." "Stuff and nonsense," said the veterinary retriever, drawing the cork out of the bottle with his teeth. "Stuff and nonsense. Here goes." What? If you poison me again, I'll scream," remonstrated the patient. "I seem to remember the smell," said Sandy. Quite likely, said the retriever. Since there is going to be all this fuss, I may as well tell you it's castor oil that I have in the bottle. What? What? Castor? Ugh, 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 choked Paddy Pig, as they poked the drenching horn into the corner of his mouth and dosed him. A good, safe, old-fashioned remedy, Paddy Pig, said Pony William. Now go to sleep, and you will wake up quite well in the morning. As a matter of fact, I don't think there is much wrong with you now. I think one dose will cure me, but Pony Billy, come here, I want to whisper. For goodness sake, send away those cats. Pony Billy took the hint and acted with tact. Mary Ellen, we are extremely obliged to you for your invaluable attention to the invalid. I shall be pleased to trot you home to Stott Farm, provided you can go at once before the moon sets. Cheesebox, we are equally indebted to you for your self-sacrificing devotion. I may tell you there are 4 rats quarreling in the granary, and one of them sounds like Ratson Naylor. Cheesebox jumped out of the stable window without another word. Mary Ellen, after making sure that the veterinary retriever had left, Mary Ellen climbed down into the stall and tucked up the patient for the last time. Was it a poor little sick piggy then? What? What? Here I say! Sandy, Sandy! Lie still then. I'm only seeking my fur-lined boots. They are somewhere in poor piggy's beddy. Come, Mary Ellen, the moon is setting. Good night, Paddy Pig, and pleasant dreams. Now we shall have some peace. Those 2 are worse than the rats, said Margaret, lying down heavily in her stall. Paddy Pig was already snoring. The sun rose next day upon a glorious May morning. Paddy Pig, a little thinner than usual, sat by the camp fire, displaying a hearty appetite for breakfast. No more toadstool tartlets for me. Give me another plateful of porridge, Jenny Ferret. Chapter 22. It is never quite dark during spring nights in the north. All through the twilight night, Charles kept crowing. He was calling the circus company to breakfast, strike camp, and away before the sun came up. Jenny Ferret's fire still smouldered. She heaped on sticks to boil the kettle. There was hustling and packing up and clucking of hens and barking of dogs. Is all taken back that we borrowed? Asked Sandy. I am answerable to honest old Bobs. What about that meal bag full of mice, Zarifa? Please, Sandy, the Coddlin Croft mice are tied up ready. Why only the mice of Coddlin Croft? Where are the other 9? Please, Sandy, might they ride to the top of Cuckoo Brow? Then they could run home all the way inside the fence. They were afraid of owls. And besides, I did so want them to meet Belinda Woodmouse. We are sure to see her. In short, they have remained, and they must be pulled, said Pony Billy good-humouredly. Here's a worse difficulty. Who is going to pull the tilt cart? Paddy Pig is not fit for it, said Jenny Ferret, hurrying up with an armful of circus trappings. That's all arranged, said Pony Billy. Come along, Cuddy Simpson. The gypsy's donkey walked into the orchard on Metal's 4 new shoes. Here come I, fit and ready to pull a dozen pigs. Good friends, I'll go with you to the hills for a summer's run on the grass. Fetch me a straw rope, Sandy. I'm too big for Paddy Pig's breast straps. Sandy! Cried Jenny Ferret. The tent pole has been forgotten and our little bucket at the well. Bother that crowing cock. Where is Ikey Shepster? The starling laughed and whistled, but he refused to leave the chimney stack. Paddy Pig was installed in the cart to ride in state. He was wrapped in a shawl and treated like an invalid, but he was in the highest possible spirits. He played the fiddle and squealed and joked. Sandy marched in front of the procession with his tail tightly curled. The cavalcade set off up the lane amidst the acclamations of the poultry and dogs. Cuckoo Brow Lane is a bonny spot in spring, garlanded with hawthorn and wild cherry blossom. It skirts the lower slopes of the hill that rises behind Coddlin Croft. The meadows on their left were bathed in pearly dew. The lane still lay in the shadow of dawn. The sun had not yet topped the brow. As it rose, its beams touched the golden tops of the oak trees in Pringle Wood, and a faint smell of bluebells floated over the wall. Paddy Pig fiddled furiously. I'll play them Scotch cap. I'll pop the weasel at them. Never again will I cross plank bridges into that abominable wood. Gee up, gee up. Get along, Cuddy Simpson. The gypsy's donkey trundled the cart through the dead leaves in the lane, steadily pulling in the wake of the caravan. Tuppeny, Zariffa, and the visitor mice were all peeping through the muslin curtains. "Is the wood full of fairies, Zariffa?" "Hush, till we get across the water, then I will tell you." "Here, you mice, let me brush up the crumbs. I want to open all the windows." Jenny Ferret was so accustomed to travel that no amount of jolts upset her housekeeping. "I might as well take down the curtains as we are going up to Goosey Foot." "Where is that, Jenny Ferret?" "Spring cleaning," replied Jenny Ferret briefly. Zariffa commenced to explain about the washerwomen up at the tarn, but Jenny Ferret bundled everybody out onto the caravan steps. Tuppeny rolled off under the surprised nose of Cuddy Simpson, who was brought to a sudden standstill whilst Tuppeny was picked up amid squeaks of laughter. He was put to ride in a basket, one of several that was slung at the back of the caravan. Zariffa sat in the doorway, and the visitor mice hung on anywhere, like Cinderella's footman behind the pumpkin coach. They set up an opposition fiddling and joked with Paddy Pig and the donkey. Indeed, Pippin fiddled so sweetly that presently they all joined in concert together, and the little birds in the trees sang to them also as they passed along. First a robin sang, little lad, where wast thou born?" "Far off in Lancashire under a thorn, where they sup sour milk in a ram's horn." Pippin did not know that tune, so he began another. "I ploughed it with a ram's horn. Sing ivy, I sowed it all over with one peppercorn. Sing holly, go whistle, and ivy. I got the mice to carry it to the mills. Sing ivy, sing ivy." Then he changed his tune, and the chaffinches sang with him. "I saw a little bird coming hop, hop, hop." Then he played another, and Zariffa pelted him with hemp seeds. "Madam, will you walk? Madam, will you talk? Madam, will you walk and talk with me?" And then he heard a cuckoo, and he played "Summer is Icumen in." The music did sound pretty all the way up Cuckoo Brow Lane. Where they crossed the beck there was a row of stepping stones, with the water tinkling merrily between them. On a stone, bobbing and curtsying, stood a fat, browny-black little bird with a broad white breast. "Bessie Duker! Bessie Duker! Tell all the other little birds and beasties that there will be a circus show this evening. Bid them come to the big hawthorn tree near the wind bushes by High Green Gate." Bessie Duker bobbed her head. She sped swiftly up the beck, whistling as she flew. The lane was steep after crossing the stream. As they climbed, they met the early sunbeams. The bank on their right was full of wild flowers, wood sorrel, spotted orchis, dog violets, germander speedwell, and little blue milkwort. "See!" cried Zariffa, "the milkwort! The milk is coming with the grass in spring. The grass is coming with the soft south wind. Listen to the lambs. They are before us in the other lane." Sandy had been in advance of the procession. He turned back. "Wait a little while, Pony Billy. Wait with a stone behind the wheel. The sheep are going up to the intake pastures in charge of Bobs and Matt. Let them gain a start before us at the meeting of the lanes. It is slow work driving lambs. How they bleat and run back and forward. Their own mothers call, but they run to each other's mothers and bawl and push." "Here under this sunny hedge I could pleasantly eat a bite and rest," said Cuddy Simpson. "Put stones behind the wheels and unharness the cart." "May we get down and play? We have been shut up so long, me and Tuppeny." "Yes, yes, go and play, but do not get left behind." Zariffa clapped her little hands. "Oh, look at the flowers." "What is that peeping at us, Zariffa, with bright black eyes?" said Tuppeny, pointing to something that rustled amongst the hedge. "It is my dearest Belinda Woodmouse. Oh, what a happy meeting." Belinda was a sleek brown mouse. She was larger than the house mice, and more active than Zariffa. Tuppeny turned shy and stared at her very solemnly, but her sprightliness soon reassured him. Zariffa introduced her to Tuppeny, Pippin, Cobweb, Dusty, and Smut. Rufty Tufty I am unable to introduce because she has stayed at home to rock the cradle. but here are enough of us to dance a set tonight on the short-cropped turf by the hawthorn bush." "More Meister Pull!" laughed Pony Billy. "Oh, oh, Mr. Pony William, you have swallowed 3 violets." "Well," said Pony Billy, "what then? I must eat." "I do not think they liked it," said Zariffa doubtfully. "Could you not eat young nettles like Cuddy Simpson?" Pony Billy rubbed his nose against his foreleg and gave it up. He moved a little further up the lane and went on nibbling. Zariffa's fairy tale. "Can the flowers feel, Zariffa?" whispered Tuppeny. "I do not know how much or how little, but surely they enjoy the sunshine. See how they are smiling and holding up their little heads. They cannot dart about like yonder buzzing fly, nor move along the bank like that big, yellow-striped queen wasp. But I think they take pleasure in the gentle rain and sun and wind, children of spring returning from year to year, and longer lived than us, especially the trees. Tuppeny, you asked me about fairies. Here on this pleasant sunny bank I can tell you better than in the shadowed woods. Are they good fairies, Zariffa?" "Yes, but all fairies are peppery. The fairy of the oak tree was spiteful for a while. Sit you round on the moss, Belinda and Tuppeny and visitor mice, and I will try to tell you prettily a tale that should be pretty, the tale of the fairy in the oak." Chapter 23. There is something glorious and majestic about a fine English oak. The ancient Britons held them sacred, and the Saxons who came after revered the Druids' trees. William, the Norman conqueror, ordered a record of all the land. Because there were no maps, they wrote down landmarks. I remember an oak in Hertfordshire that had been a landmark for Doomsday Book. This North Country oak of my story was less old than the Doomsday Oak. It had been a fine, upstanding tree in Queen Elizabeth's reign. For centuries it grew tall and stately, deep-rooted amongst the rocks, by a corner above an old highway that led to a market town. How many travellers had passed the tree since that road was a forest track? Hunters, robbers, bowmen, knights on horseback riding along, pikemen, jackmen marching, country folk and drovers, merchants, peddlers with laden pack-horses. At each change the road was mended and widened. There began to be 2-wheeled carts. Then farmers' wives left off riding on pillions. The gentry drove gigs and coaches, and alas, there came the wood wagons. Other oak trees were carried to the seaport to make ships' timbers, old England's wooden walls, but the fairies' oak towered out of reach. No woodfeller clambered up to it. Now our ships are built of steel and iron horses rush along our roads. And the district council decided to remove the rocks and corner to widen the road for motor cars. Surely it is cruel to cut down a very fine tree. Each dull, dead thud of the axe hurts the little green fairy that lives in its heart. The fairy in the oak had been a harmless, timid spirit for many 100 years. Long ago, when the oak was a sapling, there had been wolves, and the dalesmen hunted them with hounds. The hunt swept through the forest. The frightened fairy leaped into the oak branches. She found the tree a place of refuge. Therefore she loved it and made it her home. Because it had a guardian fairy, that oak grew tall and strong. And each of the finest trees in the forest had a fairy of its own as well. There were birch fairies, beech fairies, alder fairies, and fairies of the fir trees and pines. All were dressed in the leaves of their own special trees, and in spring, when the trees had new leaves, each fairy got herself a new green gown. They never went far from the trees that they loved. Only on moonlight nights they came down, and they danced together on the ground. In autumn, when the leaves fell off and the trees were left bare and cold, each fairy withdrew into the heart of its tree and slept there, curled up till spring. Only the pine and fir fairies kept awake and danced upon the snow, because the firs and pines do not lose their needle-like evergreen leaves, and that is why the fir trees sing in the wind on frosty winter's nights. The oak fairy had danced with the pine fairies beneath the hunter's moon, because oak trees keep their leaves much later than birch or beech. But the last of the russet oak leaves were blown off by a November gale. She settled herself to sleep. The oak was enormous, tall and bold. It held up its head against wind and snow and scorned the wintry weather. But the surveyor of the district council has no sentiment and no respect either for fairies or for oaks. The pine fairies were awake and saw what happened from their treetops further back in the wood. The pine trees swayed and moaned and shivered, but the oak fairy slept through it all. There arrived the surveyor, his assistant with the chain links, two men who carried the theodolite with 3 legs, a woodmonger, and 4 members of the council. They did much measuring with the chains. They made notes in their pocketbooks. They squinted through the theodolite at white and black sticks. Then they clambered up the rocks and stared at the fairy's oak. The woodmonger measured it with a tape measure. He measured near the foot of the butt. He measured again 6 foot up. He reckoned the quarter girth. They did calculations according to hoppers. The councillors said that the tree had an enormous butt, 30-foot run of clean timber to the first branch, with never a knot. They looked at the rocks and did sums. Then they went away. Nothing happened for 6 weeks, except a gale that blew down an ash tree. It crashed amongst the rocks. Its fairy fell out shrieking. She ran up and down in tattered yellow leaves till she found an empty bird nest and hid in it. In January, a number of men arrived. They had tools and wheelbarrows and carts and a wooden hut. They were quarrymen, navvies, woodfellers, and carters and wagoners with horses. They cleared away the underwood. They drilled and blasted the rocks. The noise of blasting was like thunder. It awoke every fairy in the wood, and they felled the fairy's oak. For 3 days they hacked and sawed and drove wedges. The wood was as hard as iron. Their axes broke. Their saws were nipped. They lost their wedges overhead in the cuts. But day after day they labored and swung their heavy axes and drove iron wedges with sledgehammer blows into the great tree's heart. Then one climbed the tree and tied a wire rope to its head, and they pulled with a wagon horse. The tree swayed and groaned, and the hawser broke. Again they wielded their axes, and the little fairy sobbed and cried with pain. Suddenly, with a rending shriek and a roar, the oak thundered down amongst the rocks. It lamed a horse, and it did the men a mischief. All next day they hacked and sawed. They cut off its head and arms. They left the trunk lying overnight beside the road. The fairy stayed beside it and caused another accident, upsetting a farmer's cart. His horse in the dusk saw a thing like a little green squirrel that scolded and wrung its hands. Next day came the wagoners to hoist the great tree, and then again there was disaster. The 3 legs slipped. The chains broke twice. Was it the fury of the little angry spirit that beat against the chains and snapped them? At length the tree was loaded. They drew away the wagon with 2 extra pairs of horses, and the fairy, sullen and exhausted, sat huddled upon the log. They swept the top stones off the walls. They had every sort of trouble, but at last they reached the summit of the moor. 10 chain horses were unhooked, leaving 1 trembling thill horse in the shafts. The brake was screwed on hard to face the steep descent. Down below the hill there sounded a humming, whirring sound, the noise of the sawmill. The fairy sprang from her tree and fled away into the woods. All winter she wandered homeless. One day she climbed into one tree. Another day she climbed into another tree. She always chose an oak tree, but she could not settle to sleep. Whenever a load of sawn timber came back up the road from the sawmill, the fairy came down to the road. She looked at it wistfully. But it was always larch or ash or plane, not oak. She wandered further afield in springtime, into the meadows outside the woods. There was grass for the lambs in the meadows. On the trees, young green leaves were budding, but no new green leaves for the oak fairy. Her leaf gown was tattered and torn. One day she sat on a treetop, and the west wind blew over the land. It brought sounds of lambs bleating and the cuckoo calling, and a strange new sound from the river, clear ringing blows upon oak. Men do not fell trees in May when the sap rises. Why does this sound stir my heart and make my feet dance in spite of me? Can I hear cruel hammers and saws upon oak wood and feel glad? Said the fairy of the oak. She came out of the wood, and her feet danced across the meadow, through the cuckoo flowers and marsh marigolds, to the banks of the flooded stream, where men were building a bridge. A new bridge to the farm, where none had been before. A wooden bridge with a broad span across the rushing river, and the straight, brave timbers that spanned it were made of the fairy's oak. "Is that all, Zarifa?" She had come to a stop. All except that she was happy again, and she made her home in the bridge. She lives there, contented and useful, and may live there for hundreds of years, because hard-grown oak lasts forever, well seasoned by trial and tears. The river sings over the pebbles or roars in autumn flood. The bridge stands sure and trusty, where never before bridge stood. Little toddling children take that short cut to the school, and something guards their footsteps by the bank of the flowery pool. The good farm horses bless the bridge that spares them a weary road, and something leads them over and helps to lighten their load. It wears a russet brown petticoat and a little hodden grey cloak, and that is the end of my story of the fairy in the oak. Very sweet, Zarifa, albeit long-winded. Now mount the steps and away. White clouds sail across the blue heaven. The sheep and their lambs are on the fell. The plovers and curlews are calling. Tune up, little fiddlers. Be gone. They harnessed up, they trailed away, over the hills and far away on a sunny, windy morning. But still in the broad green lonin going up to the intake, I can trace my pony's fairy footsteps and hear her eager neighing. I can hear the rattle of the tilt cart's wheels and the music of the fairy caravan.